first house they get under contract and they get that inspection. We go and buy a bungalow in Houston Heights or Woodland Heights and North Hill Heights. I'm going to tell you right now, the framing does not meet today's standards. There's ponding under the house. There's poor attic ventilation. There's some reverse polarity in some wiring, and they're all going to be the exact same. If you don't want that sort of house, we need to go buy a slab house built by Perry Homes in Pearland, because they're not going to have those issues. But you're not going to find that house in the middle of a historic neighborhood. So if those things are overly important to you, I'm going to point out what I think is normal and customary in our sort of real estate deal, and I'm going to point out to you things that will cost you more money in the future. Aging roofs, aging air conditioners, water heaters that have to be replaced, foundation, major termite damage. All wooden houses in Houston, Texas either have termites, have had termites, or are soon going to get termites. Let's be clear about it. So you're going to need to always be aware of termites. It's a climate and a condition here that we're going to have all kinds of termites. The reality of it is we have two basic kinds of termites, drywood termites and subterranean termites. In almost every scenario, they need a lot of water to keep going and doing what they're doing to create a lot of damage. The typical damage that I would find irreplaceable would be an old bungalow with a window unit on the side with the dripping air conditioner from the months of March through the months of October, and that constant drip is a wonderful opportunity for termites to find it and have a drink of water every step along the way, and then create a massive amount of damage. Most of the lumber that we bring in today probably has a termite in it, and it's going to do something along the way over the next 10 years, whatever. And the fact that there's a little the wood floors in most of the houses that we're going to look at in the Heights are reclaimed wood floors that have a termite or some residue of termites in them. The wooden house that we're looking at across the way probably has some termite in the wood siding. The fact that there's termites shouldn't really concern you. If the termites continually can do damage over an extended period of time. I could fill this office with drywood termites today, and if they didn't have enough water, they would not be able to do any structural damage to this office building. In a year, they wouldn't be able to do anything. They would have to have a constant source of water. So I think we've had this fear, and there's this outside deal that, we've got to spend all this money to kill these termites and prevent all these termites, and there is no termite prevention. The only thing that you can do is find a termite. If I gas your house up and I get rid of all the termites right that second, I can get termites the very next day. They don't follow a logical order like an ant would be. They can fly up and go from one house and skip two houses and go right to the next one. They can go from your wood fence right underneath your house. They can go right up into the eave of your house. In any scenario, they still need a lot of water. So if there's a termite in the eave of your house and there's no access to a bunch of water, it's going to eat a little bit and it's going to die right there. It's not going to be able to do a significant amount of damage. If it's of concern to you, we're going to point it all out. But almost every house is going to have conducive conditions for termites. And every house that doesn't have termites is subject to getting the very next day.
What is your opinion about tenants?
I don't like the poisoning of houses with toxic gases that have to leave a residue in the house. I'm not a big fan of that personally. If you want to do the research and that's what you want and you get some comfort from it, I think that's fine. There's hardly any scenario that I wouldn't just fix wherever the termite is. If the termite's in a joist underneath the house, we're going to replace the joist. If the termite's in the back side of the house, tear off that side of the house and replace it with something that doesn't have a termite. If it's in the wood floors, pick up the floor and replace the wood floor. I think that's a better remedy than putting poison gas all throughout your house, all on your paint, in your pantry, in your air duct. So no matter what happens, when they take the tent down and you turn on the AC, you got some poison gas over there somewhere. You got some residue in your pantry. You got some residue at the top of your closet. It's going to be on the doorknob, for God's sake. When you take your doorknob and then you wipe your eye over there right after that, you're going to have some residue left there, I would think. think. I'm not a big fan. I think the perimeter things are a scam, personally.
Yeah.
I think that they're a
You
bait
mean a
system
little
to see if
Homes,
there's a
hotels
termite there.
outside your house.
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of people love that. This is just my own personal opinion. I don't have one at my house. If I thought it was great, I'd have it at my house. I've never, sold 700-800 houses in my career. I've never recommended it. I never had a problem with these termites. It's not to say we don't have termites. We just deal with the termites. I would get rid of it.
And spot treat.
I either can spot treat or replace the item where the termite is. That's what I would rather do, to replace the item. We've had it at the back of the house, pull the siding off, replace the board where the termite was found, re-insulate, put back the siding. Now there's no evidence of a termite, right? I don't have any obligation to disclose anything more once I've removed the termite. Got a Band-Aid and I remove the Band-Aid, it's gone. So.
Yeah, the guys at Spot Treat, their whole deal is if they treat it and the worker termites take it to the queen and the queen dies, it's over.
I do use James Stewart and Stewart Pest Control for spot treatment because they give a 5-year warranty. The coastals of the world who will treat will only agree to treat again, which means, what are you going to do? Tent your house one more time? I just don't think that that's the real solution. The tenting kills the landscaping also around your house. There's a residue that's left, like that same lead-based paint we're talking about. I'm not a big fan of it. Some people are hell-bent. They feel better. It was just in the paper about these mammograms and breast cancer. We don't need to shoot everybody up with a bunch of chemotherapy and radiation that gets breast cancer either, right? We've learned over time that may not be the best way to treat breast cancer. This may not be the best way to treat a termite either. I would try and go at it a more holistic approach first. I have constant termites. I'm going to have to figure out where is the source of these termites and why can't I get rid of them? And they're, you got a leaking water faucet, plumbing deal under your wooden house in the half bath, fix the plumbing. If you have constant water under your house and you're getting a termite issue in your house, fix the water under your house. There's other things that I would think would be more important than tenting your house. And I'm just telling you, all they're going to do is treat your house again annually. If you find it in the 1 year, and they want you to have this big renewal every year, and when you don't, now you no longer have a warranty. There was no warranty. The warranty is I will treat again. I will come back and bring a bunch more chemicals and gas up your house again. And once you're already in it, are you going to gas your clothes and your couch and your sheets and your towels? I can't fathom why anyone would want to. Some people do. And that's your choice as the buyer. I'm just giving you my experience.
What's your theory on attending inspections for your buyers?
If I am the buyer, I would generally, do I think I need to sit there for 4 hours with my buyer? I don't think the buyer needs to sit there. I think that's exhausting, whatever. Yeah. I would start with the house, with the inspector, and get a reasonable expectation of what they're doing. And I would like to attend the last 30 minutes and review with the inspector the highlights, knowing that they're going to email me a report the next day and that we're going to go over it one more time. That's the highlight to know where do I need to send back another foundation person, air conditioning person, or someone subsequently. Some buyers like to stay there the whole time. That's the time the buyer often does measurements, brings their decorator, shows their parents or their kids, and I think that's lovely. It is their inspection. I don't want to unduly influence my buyer. Some people, it's like those termites. If that's your deal, then I'm going to represent you. I'm going to do exactly what you want. I gave you my experience. My partner doesn't take my experience. My kids don't take my advice all the time either. I'm just giving you my experience. And then if this is what you really want to do, then I'm going to help you go get the best chemical to juice up your house that you can get. Yeah. That's your choice. It's your house. But my personal opinion is that I don't need to sit there, and there's no great advantage for me to sit in there. It's an independent third-party inspection, and it's the time for the buyer to kind of decide if it's totally nerve-wracking, then they should just terminate. Go buy a house under stress or duress.
But you also explained to him that we're not supposed to make any comments if we are there, that we're not inspectors.
We're not. I can give you my advice. I can give you my experience, but there's each individual situation is going to be a little bit different. And we can inspect this house all day long, and tomorrow the air conditioner breaks. Yeah. We can inspected all day today and the window penetration with water comes in the next month. I mean, things happen. It's not, we don't have x-ray vision. We're not dismantling the whole thing. It's all mechanical. Your car can break tomorrow. The fan motor might break tomorrow, or you might get a flat tire tomorrow. And I mean, it's the natural thing of houses. Things come up. No, I want to have a good inspector. I want to look, especially foundations, framing, those sort of things are important. And they're more important in some instances than they are others. Okie dokie. Soil in Houston, Texas moves a lot. It moves a lot all the time. Houses move. Brand new houses are going to have movement. They're designed to move. If anyone thinks that they don't move, they're kidding themselves. It is generally related to the moisture. When you have a lot of water in the soil, it does one thing. And when you have a drought experience and there's no water, it does another thing. It's very important for these houses to maintain a balance with water in the soil. If you have a house, you need to water the lawn in the middle of the summer. It protects the foundation by having water there. Likewise, if you have too much water, that's not a good thing either. So you want to find balance, and you should expect your house to move a little bit from the wettest months of January to the driest months of August and revert back and forth there. If you're a foreign person, it's not that big a deal to buy a house these days. It matters when you go to sell a house, so you might need to talk to me about that.
Do you want to elaborate on that first?
I can. If you are a foreign citizen, it's very easy to come and buy a house. If your money's not already in America, it creates a problem. So if you're a Chinese nationalist and you're here, and you're going to put $400,000 on a house and it's still in China, that ain't going to work. You're going to need to get the money to America a lot quicker than that, and it's going to need to be what's called seasoned funds. So we need to work with a lender pretty quickly to make sure that that's not the issue. If you're a foreign citizen and you're going to sell a house, you're subject to them retaining a certain amount of the proceeds. We need to make sure that you understand how that works. So if they're a foreign entity or foreign citizen selling a house, we probably need to get someone else involved there. We're just buying a house, it's not that big a deal.
Okay, so my client really wanted to know that this person was not a foreign person, because it is the buyer's responsibility to withhold 15% of the amount realized
At
that time. So why is the buyer asked to do that?
Because the buyer has the money. It's the money's coming to the buyer first. It's not going to anyone, and it's from the buyer. So I'm selling a house.
Okay, I'm a foreign person.
You're a foreign
I'm
person.
selling the house. You buy it from me. You hold 15%.
The title company's going to do it for you. We're going to help you with the title company.
That's what I thought.
We're going to help you with the title company.
All right, but where does that 15% go?
Everyone's situation is going to be a little bit different.
Oh, okay.
We're going to get them an expert that's going to thoroughly explain it to them. We're not going to try and explain IRS rules that change on all the time. We're going to connect them with a professional that's going to explain it to them. So you just need to let me know if you're a foreign citizen and you're the seller. We're going to need to go and get you the help that you need to understand what's happening. If you're just a buyer, it's not going to be that big a deal. Buyer problem is if your money's not in America. Let me help you get a lender to explain how it's going. You're a buyer, you're paying cash, and your money's already here. We don't have a problem. Our problem stems from your money's in Mexico, your money's someplace else, your money's in the back of your car in cash. You got a problem. Floods. Flooding is a very hot topic in Houston, Texas. I want to remind you, 37% of the geography in the city of Houston is in a floodplain. It is in what is currently the 100-year or the 500-year floodplain. The maps are outdated. The maps are antiquated, and we have not mapped over half of the watersheds in the city of Houston. It is our policy, if you're buying a house in the 100-year floodplain or the 500-year floodplain, that we're going to require you to get an elevation certificate, because it will impact you later if you don't have this information. The current rules of the city of Houston would require changes if you modified your house in the future, or if it flooded, your ability to rebuild in that certain footprint is going to be limited. It is currently limited, and I expect it to get worse along the way. We're going to build and we're going to buy houses in the 100-year and the 500-year floodplain. And there's not any scenario that the city's not going to build in 37% of the deal. It's how you build, and it's, you know, that's really going to matter there. So if you're in one of these special areas, flood insurance would have been required and an elevation certificate would have been required in the 100-year floodplain. Boulevard Realty is going to require you to get an elevation certificate in the 500-year floodplain. It is going to be an additional cost of $500 to $600 because we feel it's irresponsible for you not to have the knowledge that you need in the 500-year floodplain as well as the 100-year floodplain. When the new maps come out, the expectation is that the 500 will be the 100. So then you're going to have this new set of rules and regulations regarding FEMA, flood insurance, and the ability to build and rebuild in these areas. This is a new scenario. The rules for the city of Houston go into place September 1, but we already have this rule at the firm in place already. So we're going to help you identify properties. So there are no great disclosure rules for the 500-year floodplain today. So a seller, an unethical agent, or someone who just really might not know could try and promote and sell a property in the 500-year floodplain. As your agent, as your buyer's agent, I'm going to do every bit of due diligence to verify the properties, whether or not they're in the 500-year floodplain as well as the 100-year floodplain. I want to be perfectly clear with the latest storms that we've been having. 60% of the structures that flooded, 60% is more than 50%, were outside of the 100-year and 500-year floodplain. So just because you're not in the 100-year or 500-year floodplain doesn't mean that property didn't flood. Listen to what I just said. 60% of the structures were not in the 100-year or the 500-year floodplain. More properties flooded outside the floodplain than were inside the floodplain. We need to be aware of the flooding pattern and the water pattern and the watersheds for a number of these properties, and that's what I'm going to do as your agent.
Are they going to come up with new maps soon?
They will come up with new maps. Soon is a relative term. Soon would be within the next quarter. There is no clear understanding of whether or not they're going to release one map at a time or wait till they map the entire region and then introduce them all out there. We know we're getting new maps. That is for sure. We may get one watershed at a time. So you may get the Brays Bayou watershed in 2019, and you may not get the Sims watershed map until 2022. But you're going to get new maps within the next 4 years or so. That's the expectation. But even when you get the map, there's going to be properties that flood outside the floodplain. We design in typical streets to hold a 100-year flood event. But in reality, we build the street to hold for only the 10-year flood event, okay? So it can't possibly hold the water for the 100-year flood event, okay? I got my gallon of water, and I'm pouring it in my quart jar. There's nowhere for the water to go. Streets are designed to carry water. It's the flood pattern. That's how it's designed to go. The water is going to flow from the west side of this region to the Port of Houston on the east side. That's how the topography is going to work. The water will have to come from this direction to the Port of Houston. So when your street is not designed, the water is going to rise up over the curb and into the yards of many houses. Now, we naturally can look at the road and see, is the house high above the road or low above the road? That's a clear indication you're going to have a future problem. So I'll be pointing these things out along the way as we look at houses. But, yes.
Sorry, I was talking to Susan the other day about what's going on in Bel Air.
In where?
In Bel Air.
Yes.
That they're doing some alleviation for the drainage.
Yes.
And it sounds wonderful for the new, for the new homes that are coming up for second year.
The city of Bel Air, which don't be confused with the Bel Air region, because you could be in the city of Houston and we could call that Bel Air. The city of Bel Air had been fairly proactive about their building codes to begin with. So they already had a pretty high elevation. So very few new houses in the city of Bel Air really flooded even during Harvey. Older houses, of course, did flood because they didn't meet the new criteria. There are a number of entities always working on flooding. So the city of Bel Air could do everything that it wanted to do, but if the state of Texas and FEMA and the flood control district didn't do things, so it takes all three doing things. Okay? There's never enough money at the federal level, and there's rarely enough money at the state level, and the cities can only do so much. The county is talking about a $2.5 billion bond election in August, which will be the start. They have identified, Harris County has identified $25 billion worth of needs right this second without studying it all. So with a $2.5 billion bond election, you're only addressing 10% of the current need, and you're not remotely addressing the future need. So let's be clear, there's still going to be flooding. So let's try and get houses a little higher than we currently think. And you can flood from things that happen outside of your particular area. So much of the flooding in Meyerland, much of the flooding in the west was a result of the intentional release of water from the reservoir. That is not a normal occurrence, but it can certainly create a flooding problem. So, but I think Bel Air has done a good job of addressing it. They also had more stringent rules about not allowing people to rebuild after 50%. Their 50% rule had kicked in where the city of Houston said not. Okie dokie. Where are we? Flood. Historic districts. You may not currently be in a historic district, but you could be in a historic district in the future. Historic districts are basically determined if the subdivision, the concentration of houses, are greater than 50 years of age. That's the overwhelming preponderance of neighborhoods inside the 610 loop. It takes a certain amount of effort to create a historic district, but you can begin the process with 10% of a population making an application. So once the application's made, the rules go into effect until it plays itself out. So Meyerland and Oak Forest and Lindell Park and these areas that are not currently a historic district could become a historic district in the future. Where you have a high concentration of brand new homes, you're not at any risk of being in a historic district. There are good things and there are bad things about historic districts. I'm not going to get into it. I will point out to you when you are in a historic district. There are very good maps that should tell us whether you are in a historic district and what that means. Some people really want to be in a historic district because there's a certain amount of certainty what's going to happen within that geography, and there's less amount of certainty outside of the historic district. But there are good points and there are bad points of both, and we'll point out to you what they're in. We don't have any conservation districts in the city. We have them in Galveston.
You buy a piece of property that's currently designated as a historic property.
Okay.
Is there any way to opt out of that?
There is none if you're in a historic district. If you're a national historic landmark, like 2402 Rutland is a landmark, national landmark home, not in a historic district, you can tear that sucker down. If you're a city of Houston protected landmark, you have a different set of rules. So there's a national rule and there's a state rule. West Gray, that area that Weingarten is doing, where the movie theater is a landmark, but not a protected landmark. So there's the old 90-day waiting period, and then they can bulldoze that sucker down and build whatever they want. They're building their high-rise apartment complex on what was a landmark designation, but it was not a protected landmark. You can have protected landmarks as an individual home. There are many throughout River Oaks, or you could be a landmark, but not protected, and you're only subject to the 90-day rule.
So the maps that we have, like Woodland Heights.
Those are historic districts, and if you're a contributing structure in a historic district, you cannot demolish that house. If you're a non-contributing structure in a historic district, you may tear that down, but what you replace it with is subject
no way to
to
get out of that historic designation once it's in place.
No. The answer is no. Now, we have agreed to reassess, and there was a rapid fire of designating houses, and there were potentially going to go do an assessment in Houston Heights to reclassify some houses that perhaps were not properly. We think you're properly. There is a procedure to get redesignated about 4 in the 9 years so far that we've had protected districts.
Who makes that judgment call?
The Historic Commission, HHC. The staff would make a regular one that actually must. city is going
In
to,
the Heights,
pardon me?
do they live in the Heights?
No, they don't.
Yeah,
They don't.
that's the problem.
But the city has agreed to re-look at Houston Heights. They haven't agreed to Woodland Heights or anything, but there was a fair number of houses that were converted into contributing structures that maybe shouldn't have been contributing. But I don't know how long that process is going to take. That could take a couple of years. We are very knowledgeable about historic districts. Kathleen gets paid to know about historic districts. If you have questions about historic districts, that's first line of defense. Brandon and I have a pretty good knowledge. The maps are pretty accurate these days. If it matters to someone, please ask Kathleen or myself. Inspections. The typical contract has an option period where the buyer has the right to inspect. There might be some scenario where you wouldn't have an inspection or an option period if you're going to tear something down, but certainly the contracts are designed to allow you to inspect and determine whether or not it was in the condition you thought it was. You can attempt to negotiate repairs, and you can walk through the house to your satisfaction. And I'll go over that comment again when we go over the contract. Mandatory homeowners associations are hard to understand. In the city, it's very easy to determine if you're in Cinco Ranch or the Woodlands, if you're in a mandatory homeowners association. Things like Woodland Heights, you're in a deed restricted neighborhood.
Inspection question.
Yes,
I finally got into contact with my VA buyer. Yay, after 1 year.
Okay.
I mean, maybe.
So your client, your buyer, you represent the buyer, and he's getting a VA loan.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we found somebody that is willing to work with us.
Okay.
Memorial. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. It's a great house and so on and so forth. So
This is a newer
it
construction.
is new. It's in great condition. Everything is new.
Okay.
And the seller and the seller's agents are aware of the VA and they're willing to do VA.
Okay.
The house is great condition. Now, she said that her VA appraisal, which they don't call it inspection, will not be an inspection and it's not required.
Yes.
And they told her to say that she asked 3 times, and so she asked me to do an inspection. So we went to Fox, and we're doing an inspection today.
Yeah, you can have an independent inspector just fine, but their appraisal for the VA will inspect certain things and will make comments and would require things that a normal appraiser would not. Let's just take the water heater in a closet not raised 18 inches. A normal appraiser is never even going to look at that. They don't care. They're just going to measure the house. That VA appraiser is going to look at that.
So we're going to have 2 different.
You will have and the appraiser, when he comes to do the appraisal, will inspect certain things required by the VA that a normal appraiser wouldn't look at, and they will comment.
And they told her that they will come 3 days before closing, which I advised her to ask them to please come before 14 days because we have that
Yeah,
amendment.
there's nothing. The typical VA appraiser is going to go in a normal time frame like other appraisers. There's no rule that says they have to wait and go 3 days before closing. Someone may have told them that. There's no rule that says that. If there were things pointed out by the VA appraiser, they will be required to come back and check them. So let's just say you have that water heater issue, it would have to be repaired, do some code, and then they would come back and recheck those things. Okay? Mandatory homeowner association. So let's just take Norhill. Okay? You're in a deed restricted deal, and you have a mandatory homeowners association. Even in Norhill, you have one, but you don't have the standard form that you would get in Cinco Ranch Section 17 or whatever. You're in a deed restricted homeowners association there. Houston Heights is an all volunteer opt-in homeowners association. There's absolutely no requirement for any home to be in any association. Woodland Heights is basically the exact same way. Norhill is a little different. You are in the Norhill. You're a member of that sort of deal, but there's no great
But you have to sign in.
You don't have to sign in.
You don't have to pay.
You don't have to pay anything. That's just the
You
way
have
it
to
is.
apply.
You know, Oak Forest is confusing which ones you're in and which ones you're not in, and how all that's going to work. It's all kind of complicated, but I mean, it's Mandel Place. If you're on Mandel on Washington, I mean, you're in a deed restricted area in Mandel. the 7 of Marshall, but you don't have the same disclosure rule. It doesn't mean that you don't have a homeowners association for Mandel Place. You do have a homeowners association for Mandel Place.
So you would check the box that you are in one, even though you know.
It's a gray area when they're not organized. I mean, the ones that collect a due, that require a fee, that's mandatory on an annual basis, then you need the form. If you don't have an annual fee tied to that, you got the form. Yes.
Okay, but when we do have to have a form,
Yes.
is there a, because I've had a couple of these, is there a typical thing that who pays for what?
Yeah, it's gotten better that now the seller's going to pay. It always was the seller. Then it was this kind of optional deal because the sellers didn't want to pay. Now we're back to the sellers paying. So, the typical, the resale certificate and that sort of stuff. Is that what you're asking about?
Right.
But yeah, but if you're in Garden Oaks and you're buying in Gomo number 5 over there, yeah, the buyer's going to pay
Sounds good.
0.75. That's right.
So
Yes.
we have to put that number in there.
Yes.
Some listings specify like buyer to pay the transfer fee and they give the amount.
Yes, I'm not saying that there's not an instance, but the typical forms today have transferred the responsibility back to the seller. Okay.
Makes sense.
Now, when you go to buy, let's say we're buying in Pearland, section 17 again over here, and we're closing on July 1st, the middle of the year. Many of those deals are going to, so the seller probably paid for the whole year, his homeowners association fees. So the seller's going to get credited back his half a year, whatever pro rata share, and the buyer may have to put up 3.5 months of additional homeowners association, just determine on their homeowners association how it's going to work there. The general transfer fees, resale certificates, documentation today is typically paid for by the seller. And almost most of these forms, we've gotten off of it being optional and it says the seller. The older forms had a box and you could check the buyer or the seller. The typical forms today are transferring back the responsibility to the seller to provide the information, pay for the resale certificate, that sort of thing.
And we get those forms from the HOA.
You get them from the HOA. Almost all of these today are online. I mean, it wasn't 10 years ago, but you can go to Pearland section 17 and find it all online. You can go to Cinco Ranch, HOA number 101, and you can probably find these things. You can find them on Bering in Augusta. You can find them in Tanglewood. You can find them, they're almost all online these days. Okie dokie. We don't have a lot of mineral interest, so we're not going to go with that. If you do strike oil in the middle of Houston, you're going to use your proceeds to pay off your loan first. They're not going to give you any checks. But it is illegal to for oil in the city of Houston anyway. For the buyers, it's pretty important for you to understand the multiple listing service. The multiple listing service is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Houston Association of Realtors, and they grant me the permission to use that provided I pay by their rules, which means to you as the buyer, the sold information is going to be on the multiple listing service. HCAT is really smart these days. They subscribe to the multiple listing service. So whatever you buy your house for, that's going to be what your price value starting because it's value based on where every year. So if your assessment is less than what you paid, keep your mouth shut. And if it's more than what you paid, you're going to use your sold information and go down to HCAT and they're probably going to adjust it just fine. I know as a buyer, you would really like for all that information to remain confidential. If it was all confidential, I would have no way to give you any advice what something's worth because it's only worth what someone else is willing to pay for it. And that's the information that we use. So there is no scenario where the information isn't marked down as sold on the MLS. Information on the MLS is not always accurate. The year built of the houses is often wrong. The square footage is often wrong. I mean, if there's something that's overly important to you, people fill out forms wrong all the time. If they do it intentionally or deceitful, it's one thing. We have some level of recourse, but yeah, I doubt any of those room sizes are really accurate over there. That's not, if it's really important to you what the room size is, we need to go measure it ourselves. We'll find our own information.
It's going to double my value of my house. And the sales help me to get it exactly back to what I
That's right. That's right. You can use information to lower your
first year.
Permits are required in a lot of the instances with houses, but I will be honest with you, the average homeowner does not get a permit or an inspection for many of the repairs of their homes. Major undertakings, you would assume that they do so. It's public information. If you want to know if someone pulled a permit, there's a link on the website. You can pull it up and see if they actually did it. Where it gets us most of the time is we get under contract on a house and got to raise the water heater to be 18 inches, and they get their brother-in-law to do it. They were required to get a permit. They were required to have it inspected. It says it in the contract, but I'm just letting you know it's not often done. Most people have replaced an air conditioner, a roof, and a water heater, a window, and a door, installed a ceiling fan and a doorbell. And they were all required to get a permit for those sort of things, and they never do it. And I doubt you do it either when you go and replace your ceiling fan. Okay? They don't do it because it's cumbersome, it costs money, it delays things, and every time you pull a permit, it's one more excuse for them to raise your taxes over there. So there's lots of reasons people don't pull permits. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just letting you be aware. There's a speed limit out there, but there's plenty of people driving faster than that, and it's just not cost effective to stand out there and park 9 policemen to monitor that all the time. Does it really matter if they drive 37 or 29?
So now when you put that on the seller's disclosure, it becomes an ASTAT. Is
Yeah.
there any problem?
There's no problem. The average person does replace a doorbell and a ceiling
So
fan.
proudly put it on your seller's disclosure.
I mean, I think I would be honest about it, and then, like I say, I think it can get you in. If you're then the seller and you're required to do it, you need to figure out how important is it that we get the permits for those sort of things. But I would, it's rarely do we do it. It's the stickler agent when you send the invoice in the day before closing, and they say, where was the permit, where was the inspection, and holds up the closing for 5 more days, because you got to go pull a permit and then call for the inspection and that sort
Would
of
have put it on
thing.
the seller's disclosure that we did all these jobs without a permit, you're kind of covered, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, that's,
No ramifications.
I'm selling 2402 Rutland to Jerry's client, and yes, the whole garage apartment was done without any permits. We checked that it was done without permits. We didn't say we did it with permits. Inspect it, see if it's not to city code, and if it's not to city code, ask us to get it to city code. That's perfectly reasonable. But when they inspected, there wasn't anything wrong with it. It was to city code. But I think there's plenty of people that I just need us all to be aware. There's hardly any houses that we're looking at that didn't do some work without a permit.
So that's usually not an issue.
It's usually not an issue. It's when the work is not to the standard of the permit that it is an issue. Personally.
What if you
And I'm not saying, let's be clear, I'm not advocating not use a permit. I'm just educating the buyer that if this is really important to you, then, we can check and
They
see.
can't
if
take
they
it to the city and get you in trouble for the past or anything.
I will be honest, where it can get you in trouble at the city is the drainage issue regarding to filling in your ditch. It is the #1 thing that they are going back on, and there is a whole new initiative at the city to go back on these culverts that were filled in. Yes, they can go back years, and they can fine you, and they can undo what you did and charge you to redo it. So the people that are filling in the ditches without doing it to permit are subject to the city cracking down on it. It's adversely impacting the drainage of abutting property owners, which is a bigger problem. No one's gonna make you go back, and the city's not gonna go inspect your house and see if you replaced your AC with a permit or not. It is required to pull a permit, so that the general contractor is gonna ask you, do you want me to pull a permit or not? It's $6,000 without a permit, and it's $60,000 with a permit. Well, you want the permit because you want the city inspector to go out there and inspect the work. So I understand if you're get under contract and you're having repairs done, that you would definitely think that would probably be done with a permit. The fact that you're buying a house and there was work done without a permit is
Yeah.
extremely.
The sellers have no recourse by putting that on the seller's.
I mean, I ripped out that deck stuff and then it never occurred to me that I.
You're a criminal.
I know.
I mean, look, how many of these people use a permit to install an electronic gate? How many of
I
them use a permit to replace their garage door opener? I mean, I could just go down the laundry list of things.
But the AC is a good point.
The AC is a very good point. I would want a permit. I would want to know that someone inspected that deal to make sure it was to
Because
code.
I had a client, he replaced the AC,
Yep.
and then it wasn't working, and the next guy that came and checked it, say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong.
Okay, possession, there is nothing magic about possession of these houses.
Okay,
You're-
I was gonna ask, what about historic changes in a historic home without permits?
Well, you face a couple of problems. If it's truly just the permitting deal, there's nothing different in a historic district versus outside the historic district. If you modify something that was regulated by the historic district, well, windows require a permit, but yes, if you replace your windows you're not allowed to replace your windows in a historic district, first of all. So if you do it, you are subject to a number of things. They have not done a very good job of enforcing it. And there is a new recommendation coming out quickly that would be, we have an environmental court. We have a court if you pour your paint in the ditch over here, they can fine you, ticket you, and send you to environmental court. It's the same sort of enforcement. There is a mechanism for the city to charge you a fine, like a ticket, and a daily rate, and for compliance. They have not typically enforced that with the window issue, but they are going to soon make a new recommendation for new enforcement and the penalty that would be associated to it. Okay? All right. Possession, is all this good? We're going over some things? Okay. Possession, there's nothing magic about these possessions. So, I mean, if you're the buyer, you want everyone to be gone and you want to move right on into your house the day of closing. If you're the seller, there's lots of times that things just don't work out and you've gone to the expense of renting an apartment, hiring a moving van, moving your stuff out. Now your house doesn't look good and the buyer doesn't close. The buyer at most is going to lose their earnest money. The seller could be out $20,000 putting things back in there. So sellers want to stay till they get their money. So that's why we negotiate these sort of things. Normal and customary in my world, especially after the recession of 2008, was for the seller to stay in because, I mean, it just was too cumbersome. And the average was about 2 days for free, and we moved on down the path. That was fairly typical, 2008, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Then we forget about those sort of things. If you have any longer period of lease, buyers don't want to buy a house. They just spent $1 million. Now they can't move into the house for a week or two. So the buyer wants to get in quickly. The seller wants their money first. It's the art of negotiation. There's nothing magic one way or the other. It works best, of course, when the seller is out. But in a lot of scenarios, they're just not going to be out. Maybe they need this money in order to buy their other house. So they're going to need to rent from this one. Maybe where they're going isn't ready yet. But there's any number of scenarios. There's not one scenario. We're just going to have to negotiate our way. When it's vacant, when we make our offer, that's great. We're going to know how that's going to work. When it's occupied, we're just going to have to negotiate our way through there. Lenders don't like long-term leases. Long-term in their world is more than 90 days. We just negotiate our way through there. But there's not a standard. You can charge anything. They can charge anything. It's harder to renegotiate the day before closing. If you buy a house and you have a loan, they're going to require you to insure it. You need to be working with your homeowner's insurance. What the current person pays for property insurance has no relationship to what you're going to pay. What you pay is determined upon your credit worthiness and how much you insure and do you have a car with them and other things. So I can ask what they pay in property insurance. That's not going to be that relative one way or the other. You don't need to insure the land. So if I'm buying a house, I want to work with you to make sure that we're not over-insuring. I assure you, the average person in Houston, Texas is overpaying for insurance.
Sure.
Because they're buying a house in Westbury for $500,000. The thing burns down, you still have a $400,000 lot. Now, the lender may not allow you to only insure the $100,000. You're going to replace its replacement value. About $150 a foot is the average replacement value today. Where in River Oaks, it's more. Your 30-year-old house burns, you're not going to put it back to 30-year-old standards. We got to build you a new house or whatever, so they have to insure the replacement value. So we should work with your insurance company to make sure that we're really not overpaying for homeowners insurance. Do not go get insurance for 100% of the value of your sales price. Think about what it costs to replace your house or what your contents might be. We'll help you with that along the way. Some warranties, residential service contracts, I'm not a big fan of them. Sellers want to give you one because they want to give you that instead of something else, you know. So you've got a 10-year-old air conditioning unit, you want a new air conditioning unit, they want to give you a home warranty. I'll tell you the home warranties cost on average around $400. You've got to assume that they have an office building and the little marketing chick drives a BMW, so they got to be paying out less than $400 for the average person, right? It's like an insurance deal. So this is what I find frustrating about it. I discover a leak on Monday of my kitchen sink. I've got a leak now. They say they will be out Thursday, like the old cable guy, and they'll be there from 1 to 5. You have to take off Thursday from 1 to 5. Get out your checkbook. You're going to pay $75 for them to come. They're going to look at your sink. They're going to tell you that's normal wear and tear, and it's not covered. Meanwhile, we now got to go hire a plumber to go fix the deal, and they're not going to be there till the following Tuesday. We've had a leak for 8 days. We paid $75. We didn't get it covered.
Yeah.
It's not going to cover normal wear and tear, and it's generally not going to cover the labor. You have a 20-year-old air conditioning unit. Yes, it might be a good investment then because it probably covers the parts, but not the labor. That's $3,000. You're weighing your choices there. But I'm just, in general, I find them frustrating. I'd rather have the money. If these things were so great, everyone that owned a home would have a service contract. Right?
Yeah.
And you can't tell me, you can't find me 5% of the population that keeps it after year 2.
I think this is fun.
I'm not a big fan of them, but if you want one, we can ask for one. Maybe you had a great experience. I'll try and refer you to the ones I think are best. The sellers generally want to offer one. I wouldn't get a warm, fuzzy feeling about a residential service contract. We don't have a lot of restrictions near the international border unless we get annexed by Mexico soon. I need you to recognize school boundaries change all the time. Okay, so if you're zoned to Harvard Elementary today, it doesn't mean you're going to be zoned to Harvard Elementary tomorrow. There are all kinds of requirements for schools these days, a certain ethnicity, a certain economic bracket. They can redraw the lines at any given moment. So don't buy a house because it's zoned to a particular elementary school or high school. If that's your only reason for buying that, you need to be aware you might have to sell if the line is moved.
What do you How often do they move?
Go to HISD.com and plug in this map and rely on that information. But you can tell them it's current. You can tell them the truth. It's currently zoned to Harvard Elementary.
But do you ever, they want your opinion. Do you ever give them your opinion on schools and the schools in the area?
I give them what facts I know about schools. I have plenty of people that are zoned to Travis Elementary that love to go to Helms International Baccalaureate program with their dual language. I have plenty of people that live here and want to go to River Oaks. I have people in River Oaks that send their kids to this one over here. There's waiting lists on almost all of these elementary schools around here. Certainly some schools are more desirable than others, and that has impacted the value of property. It's not like I don't go on a listing appointment. If you're up at 23rd Street and you're zoned to one school, what someone is willing to pay for that is different than if they're zoned to a more desirable school. Certainly I tell them. And yes, I would point out the fact that they're not, they're zoned to a particular school. There's rankings that came out again Sunday. I thought the rankings were fairly stupid one more time. I wouldn't rely, I told the police chief, she was hell-bent on only going to 2 or 3 elementary schools and was convinced Harvard Elementary was the worst school on earth for some online review that she had. And I begged her to please go over there and interview some people, and they ended up buying a house zoned to Harvard Elementary, and she absolutely loves it. I have people who live in Harvard that want to go to Travis. I got people zoned to Travis that want to go to Harvard. So, I don't know that there's an overwhelming. I think in our industry, we all know that certain neighborhoods are more valuable because they're zoned to certain elementary schools. Yeah. And there are certain neighborhoods that are less valuable because they're zoned to what has been an underperforming school. And if that's overly important to you, I will point out where the current lines are and you decide if you want to live there or not, but here's a map. But the lines change all the time.
You said something's going on with Love.
Yes, I think there's a
Something's
lot
going on.
of,
So what's happening with Love?
did the principal resign? Did they announce that or anything recently? There's a lot, Love has one of the highest amount of property of an inner city school. It has land. That's its overwhelming assets, okay? When you have an inner city environment that has land, you're going to invest money on the high property piece of property, on the greater size of land than you are the smaller size. So if one campus has 4 acres and one campus has 10 acres, doesn't it make sense to invest money in the 10-acre school? You don't have to buy 10 acres, you already own the 10 acres. So there are a number of things planned for Love Elementary.
Right, because that's a great.
The whole thing's in a flux, the whole magnet program's in a flux, the whole Dane card program's in a flux. You know, there was talk of eliminating the magnet schools at Harvard and Travis. They worked just fine and put them in schools that have not performed as well in the past historically. So there was a movement for that, but the whole thing when the superintendent left and the budgetary shortfalls kicked in, it's just a whole mess at the moment.
But they've got money going into Love?
Yes. They want a new $1.7 billion bond issue also, but I'm not sure that's gonna pass. So. Okie dokie, septic tanks, you don't have a lot of septic tanks and on-site sewer facilities in the city anymore. If you're buying out in the country, we probably need to get you up to date on the different types of septic systems. And the older septic systems cannot be repaired, they must be replaced with the newer ones. So that can be a factor if we're buying a property in Fulshire. I'll be sure to point those things out to you. Sex offenders are all throughout our city. There's a little website that you can find them, and I want to assure you there are plenty of people in River Oaks whose kids are pedophiles, and they live right there in the middle of Lazy Lane in Belmonte. If you don't look them up, here they are right here. But I need you to be overly conscious that no matter where you live, if there's not a registered sex offender today, there could be one beside you tomorrow. And if there's one today, they might move tomorrow. So it's a very fluid thing how it works. Sex offenders range every spectrum of the economy. There's just as many wealthy people as there are poor people. There are just as many white people as there are black people. So I wouldn't think that they're high concentration anymore like you would think it would be 20 or 30 years ago. So if it's an over concern to you, here's a website, look it up. Plenty of them in the Heights. Plenty of them.
Can I tell you something funny?
Yes.
I sold a house to some friends' children, okay? And so, for closing, they said, guess what? The seller
Is a sex offender?
was the sex offender. And let me tell you something, y'all. Have you ever shown a house where you walk in and go, could fall in love with this guy? You know, beautiful clothes, beautiful shoes, pictures of him, gorgeous guy. Gorgeous. Interior, and I said, no, y'all are kidding me. He was a registered sex offender.
You know, maybe some angry lady that.
I mean, I don't want to even go
No,
down this
I
path. You'd be surprised at the number of
know.
people that are labeled, that are married to that person now, you know, but they were 15 and got caught in the backseat of a car and
I
some
know.
rabid person turned. I mean,
I know. Billy, hey, I'm cutting. Okay. It was funny.
there's plenty of sex offenders with all kinds of sex things going on over here.
Is there something you want to tell us?
Square footage is a very gray area also, how it works, how one measures, if it's overly important to you, just be aware that everyone measures differently, so if something's important to you, let me go figure it out for you. Don't have a lot of new statutory tax districts inside the city, you might have them outside in a new planned subdivision. I do think this surveillance is very important to point out. Just any property that we go and see, you are subject to being recorded. There are plenty of people that use their little systems to record. They want to hear the comments. They want to know if you showed up on time. They're looking to see how long you stayed. It happens all the time. You must assume that you're being recorded. I'm not a big fan of this. I think they need to disclose. I don't get a vote at the moment, but you need to assume that you're not in my car. Let's don't say anything you don't want someone else to hear. They can hear you in the driveway, they can hear you on the front porch, they can hear you in the house, they're watching you. They definitely know when you're coming and when you're leaving, and how long you stay there. Survey, we're gonna require you to get a new survey. The survey company is the only one that's going to be held liable in the event that the survey is wrong. If we get a survey from some other source, they're not held to the same standard as if you purchase your own survey. So it's our company policy that we're going to require you to buy a new survey, which is the only thing that's gonna tell you where the property line is. The title company ensures a legal description. HCAD's got some number over here, but if you wanna know where the line is, we need to hold some survey company liable and let's pay them to tell us where they think the line is.
So you're saying if they have an existing survey, somehow that gets watered down,
That survey company only is responsible to the person that paid for it. They do not have to defend the line for someone. But if you get a survey and you hand it over here to Jerry, and now Jerry wants to file a claim based on the fact that the line is wrong, Jerry has no recourse with that survey company, only the individual that paid for it, whose name is on it, that the survey company did. Their lobby is very strong in the state of Texas. They have no liability except the individual that hired them. Okay? That's why you should hire them, because it's the only thing that holds them accountable to justify where the line is. Our issue is rarely when we buy a house and we have a survey. It's when the next door neighbor, 6 months later or 6 years later, goes and sells his house and they get a survey company and the lines are different. Selling 605 Petty today. My clients, the Kunkelmeyers, bought 605 Petty from the next door neighbor. They had a survey. Now we have the next door neighbor with a different survey and it's 2 feet different. You will see on MLS, I'm just being safe and I'm putting the new lot size as 48 feet wide, not 50 feet wide. They bought what they thought was a 50-foot wide lot. Now we're reselling a 48-foot wide lot. They had that issue with their survey company. Surveys are wrong all the time. At the Planning Commission, every other Thursday, I get people come before us and they built something using a build line that's incorrect because they used a survey and they bought a tear down from someone 10 years ago and it doesn't have the new prevailing lot size on over the build line on that. And they go and they design a house, they go and get a permit, and they go and they put in the foundation and they put up the first floor. When the neighbor now figures out the bastards had built 10 feet into the build line and they just got the corner of 7.5 in Beverly, had to move their house 7 feet because they had a survey that was wrong. It happens all the time in my world. Happens all the time.
What is the statute of limitations? We have a 2-foot issue right now where a couple bought a house probably 8 years ago and they want to put on their big mansion addition in the back. And they've just notified their next door neighbor who's been there for 30. 2 feet over into your driveway and will pay to jack up your driveway, but there's nowhere to move the driveway.
Real questions here. Did the within the 30 years have a survey from 30 years ago?
They're looking for it.
If that survey company is still in business, doing business, then they're still liable. If they're no longer business, there's not some insurance policy that covers that. As far as the adverse possession or all these people, the way it really works is did whoever who says they own it go down to HCAD and tell them that they own it and start paying taxes on that, and never do they do that. So the typical alley issue where someone's built 7.5 feet into the alley over here, and they want to say, oh no, I have adverse possession. I've been maintaining that for 30 years. You go and say the same thing. Did you go down to HCAD? Did you tell HCAD that you owned it? Did you start paying taxes on all that deal? And when they didn't, they have no right to use that property.
Okay.
But
Because
my
the other
original
couple has
survey
been-
company told me they're only liable for 10 years.
Is that what they
I've
told you?
heard too. Really?
And that may be true. That may be true. I don't know that that's true. That's what they said.
That's what they told me.
I need to check into that. I'll check into that.
So if the buyer absolutely, the seller pay for it and.
Put it in their name.
Did you just put that in special provisions?
Wait, say that again. Seller pays for the
Yeah,
survey.
we want this buyer to buy a survey, that's, yeah. But
And he's
if,
walking,
yeah. Well, if he doesn't want to pay, if they're cheap, they don't want to pay the money, they want the seller to pay on their behalf, and we put the survey in the buyer's name, it is possible to do that. It meets the fine letter of the law. The seller can pay for the buyer's inspection, the seller can pay for a lot of things, I mean, they can. Is it a good practice, and can you get them to agree to it? I would, most people, most of the big firms now all have the same policy, so they put it there pretty clearly, buyer obtain loan survey, buyer's expense. It's fairly common these days, not everywhere. Surveys, any survey questions? We've gone over that. Synthetic stucco. I would be leery of all stucco houses in humid climates, from New Orleans all the way to Houston, Texas. We seem to have this infatuation with stucco in Houston. I'm not sure why. The climate is really not designed for stucco. The climate isn't designed for stucco. The climate isn't designed for stucco. We keep building these houses out of stucco. There is synthetic stucco known as EIFS, and it had significant problems with EIFS, especially from about the late 80s through 2003, 4, 5 in that area. There are plenty of people that use this synthetic stucco. It's basically with styrofoam that they covered over with a layer of, let's just call it stucco paint. What happened was it deteriorated significantly. You went, you touched, you took it with your little finger, and it deteriorated completely. You just didn't notice it on the second, third, and fourth floor up there where your rooftop terrace was, until it had deteriorated such that the water penetrated completely, and then the whole framing system was rotten, including most of the balconies and things of that nature.
and lenders would not lend.
Yeah, no, so, you know, is it a good policy to have a stucco inspection no matter what house you're buying? And it probably is. If you're the buyer, I think if I was selling a stucco house, I would make sure that they understand the maintenance required of a stucco house. Certainly if you're buying a 15-year-old stucco house, I would find it important, but there's plenty of brand new ones that have problems just as much as any of the others. So a stucco inspection is relatively common and more common than ever. If you're the seller, I mean, same thing. I would hope that you would get ready for these stucco inspections. You know, there's forms about how to do it, and you're going to drill these little holes, and just because you drill, it's kind of like this. If I just check here, it doesn't mean I check right here, and it's not the save all. You're going to have to look for some moisture penetration from other places as well. But a stucco inspection is relatively common. Someone else's stucco inspection, if they did it 5 years ago, is really irrelevant in my world. It wouldn't make any difference. Same thing. You do these stucco inspections today, doesn't mean you're not going to have a stucco problem later. One set of stucco problems is just EIFS in general. We don't have that today, but we still have other stucco problems.
They still use that stuff.
They still use it, not much.
Not on the skin.
Right.
I just had
So,
2 quotes
Yes.
come in, 14,000 and 97. I mean, I don't need that.
97.
Yeah, it was the straw, and they bailed, and you determined it.
Would you recommend it to your client, and then they say, oh, we decided not to do it, you know, we have friends who bought town houses, and they didn't have that, everybody's fine.
No.
Do you insist, I mean, do you?
Make them sign something?
No, I mean, well, yeah, I mean, what do you do? Because mine, I said you ought to, we wrote it in special provisions.
lot of people
that the
don't.
sellers would agree to it, they wouldn't say no.
Right.
And then they're like, no, I talked to my friends, they bought it, and they said, oh, you don't need that.
Oh, no, I didn't.
I mean,
I put it in writing.
you can buy a used car all day long, and some people are going to take it to their mechanic before they buy it, and some people are just going to buy it. I mean, you can't make them.
No.
And there are some people that
But
just don't want
you
to
do
go.
have them sign something.
I think it's a good practice to have them
What
sign
if I
something.
had it in writing and gave them referrals, and then they said no?
We can't make them do it. They have the unrestricted
sign
right to,
something.
as long as they had an option period and they choose not to do it, they're big boys and girls. We can't, they're always going to be a little different. They just don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. Stucco? All right, tax prorations. Tax prorations are often misunderstood. Let's be clear. Your value is based on January 1 of every year, but we're not going to get, the rates aren't even going to be set till the end of the summer. And we're not going to get the bill for this deal until sometime in October, which they're going to be due. Most people pay them either in November, December, or till January 31st, okay? Values constantly rise. So when I go and look at a house in March of 2018, the only thing that we have at the moment is the 2017 value from January 1, okay? We know in March of 2018 that the value is probably going to go up. It probably didn't go down, it went up. It's probably going to go up by 10%. The title companies love to pull these tax certificates, and that's really just proving that the taxes are paid. That's what it's first of all doing. And it's giving us what was the value the last time that they were certified, which is January 1 of 2017. When we get further from March, everyone can know what the value is. Today, you can look it up. The majority of houses have some value. So buying a house and it's at $800,000, and last year's taxable value was $680,000. I don't want the proration to be on $680,000 because we know we're going to get a bill higher than that in October of 2018, and the seller's going to be long gone over there. They're going to be in Michigan in their lake house now. So how am I going to find them? So in this period of time, we have this tax proration agreement, and it especially comes up prorated tax provision. The whole separate little form here is the last one in your little packet. Especially when you're buying a builder who bought a lot for $400,000 and now are selling a house in 2018 for $1 million. We know that they want to pay taxes on $400,000, but we know that value is not going to be going up. So we submit this form so we can begin the dialogue of what because common sense generally works here. If I'm selling a house for $1 million in September of 2018, I know it wasn't worth $1 million January 1, 2018, if it was under construction. So we might all agree to use a hypothetical number. Let's use the dirt plus the framing. Let's use $600,000. So you're just going to have to piece your way through there. The way the contracts work is we don't have to use the number that we know is wrong. Okay? We can't make them use another number, so it's the art of negotiation again along the way. The best thing I can say is let's have the fight early on. It's easier to debate it early on than it is the day or two before closing. When given the information, most people will yield to common sense. It's who's going to hold the extra money, the seller or the buyer? Nobody trusts anyone the day before closing, remember? So we have to find some common ground. But I want you to be aware, so we want to use this form, especially in the new construction, beginning of a year, some new, significantly different tax strategy. Grandma died, we're selling grandma's house, it's the estate of something, the estate was probated in 2017, now we're selling it in 2018. We know all those exemptions are going away. So I just need for you to be aware of it and be aware of how the tax prorations work. And then you're going to get, the buyer's going to get reassessed January 1 of 2018 based on what they just paid for it. A couple things about proration. How much money are we going to get at closing, and how your tax is going to work from that point forward. Option periods. We in Texas have this lovely thing called the unrestricted right to terminate, and we advise almost every contract in any scenario gets some unrestricted right to terminate. Even if you're tearing something down, you still need to know some other things about it. So they're cooling off periods. You must pay for this. You must have some consideration. If they're going to take their house off the market, you must have given them something for that. You can give them a chicken and a cow, but you got to give them something, some form of consideration. $1 has been ruled by the court system not to be adequate compensation. These people that want to pay for their extension and pay $1, the courts have already said that was not adequate compensation for your right to extend. So don't put $1. If you had $100 for 7 days, then go over there and put $15 a day for your new extension. Don't put $1. Okay? Hear me? Don't put $1. You have to pay something. When you're in that period, the buyer has the unrestricted right to terminate. And for those of you that are relatively new, we didn't do it this way before. 20 years ago, you negotiated a house. Repairs not to exceed $3,000. You inspected. it needed $15,000 worth of work. They gave you the $3,000, you had to buy the damn house or you lost your earnest money. This wasn't a very good system over there. How can you negotiate the road? Some of these relocation companies still have some of these because other states still do it that way. They don't all have the unrestricted right to terminate. So you got to work your way through there. Hard to negotiate your repairs when you don't know the condition of the property, right? So we have this unrestricted right to terminate, but a couple things. You got to pay for it. You got to get your option fee receipted in a timely manner now. So I need the check. I need to get it over to the other side. I need to get it receipted. That's my responsibility as an agent. And then you need to also tell me what you want done, and we must terminate by 5 p.m. on the last day. So we have till 5 p.m. It's hard to get an answer when you tell someone at 3 p.m. People work, they're lawyers, they're in the court system, they're teachers, they're doctors. They're not going to respond in an hour or two. It's reasonable to give people a day or two to respond to your request. So if we're getting down to the end, we're going to need to negotiate for some extension. And the negotiation goes both ways, okay? When we want to extend because we need to ask for something, they can ask for $1,000 for the next day. They can ask for $10,000. They can ask for whatever they want. Otherwise, you get to terminate. You get your earnest money back, but you don't have a house now, and you've already invested about $1,000 to $1,500 in your inspection. So let's do our due diligence a little earlier. The art of negotiation. Sellers want the very smallest option period. You want the very longest option period. No one's going to agree to take their house off the market for 20 days for $50 or $100. The newer it's on the market, the tighter the option period is going to be. The longer it's been on the market, the more chance you have to negotiate for something longer. Most people in Texas can get an inspection and negotiate their repairs within 7 days. It's done all the time. We would like to ask for 10, and we're going to somewhere get along the middle there. Most sellers would not find it advisable to take their house off the market for 2 weekends. They don't want to do it. So if we're negotiating on a Tuesday or Wednesday, it's probably easy enough to get 10 days. You're negotiating on a Friday, it's not going to be so easy. They want to put their house back on the market the following weekend if you can't work it out. So just understand kind of how the seller feels, and then let's figure out a way. You negotiate on a Monday, you get accepted on Tuesday or Wednesday, you get your 10 days, that gets us through that weekend, and you get to terminate by the following Thursday, and they can put their house back active. Appears to be pretty win-win for people. Okay? That got everyone what they wanted. It's when we start to negotiate on these Fridays, it gets a little more persnickety. We'll ask for as much as we can, but I would say let's get ourselves, here's, and I'll go over some list of inspectors with you and get them lined up. It's supply and demand. They're busiest in March, April, and May, and October, November, December, and they're readily available in January, and February, and July, and August. Tidewater, we don't need to go over that here. Title insurance is a form of insurance that's insuring liens against your property from the point of closing onward. It's the only backwards. It's insuring what happens from the point of closing backwards. It's the only kind of insurance that works that way, typically paid for by the seller. If some lien holder comes up, the roofer or someone that says he wasn't paid from 6 months ago, that's what title insurance does. If 3 heirs come back and say, this was grandma's house and my brother screwed me out of my inheritance, that's what you're going to use. So if we need title insurance, it's typically paid for by the seller. Although all things are negotiable.
Urban Living is not paying for that.
Pardon me?
Urban Living, they say that.
Well, they want they're monopolists. They're trying to make money. So there are many builders that require the buyer to pay for the title policy unless you use it to negotiate. Unless you use their title company, unless you use their lender, unless you use. Yeah. There is some instance the seller it's a negotiable fee, and they can say that if they want to say that. You don't have to agree to it, or you can. So it's $300,000 and they don't want to pay for the title policy. Only agree to pay $296,000 and pay for the title policy. You just made yourself $2,000. It's all negotiable. Okay. It used to be the seller. Now it's a negotiable fee. Okay. It's typically paid for by the seller. It's insuring the portion of time when that seller owned it. Good. That's what we're insuring it. That's why they should pay for it. Yeah. Utilities, you only switch the utilities over into your name. You know, don't try and create a lot of stress by having the seller move out one day and you switch on your utilities and move in the same day, because close dates are very flexible. They can be moved by any number of entities through no fault of one or the other. They get moved by title companies, they get moved by appraisers, they get moved by lenders, they get moved by buyers' work schedules. They, you know, allow for some flexibility. The most stressful thing on earth is having something be needing to close, you know, at some particular hour or date, and it just creates undue stress for everyone involved. Please, let's don't close on the last day of the month. Let's don't try and close at 5 o'clock and think you're going to move in anytime soon. They don't close and fund that easily. It takes a few hours generally after that. Let's close on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Let's close at noon, and let's plan on taking possession a day or two later. Okay, that's what we all need to plan on. Anything else is creating undue stress on all of the parties. Allow for a little flexibility. When it's not flexible, everyone is screaming, and it could have been prepared so much easier if we'd have just prepared in advance for flexibility. Don't have any wells. You must use city water here in the city of Houston. You can have a well these days in the city of Houston for irrigation purposes. Title companies are really clamping down on wire fraud and actually just fraud in general. I mean, half the time they don't want to take the wire, and half the time they won't take a cashier's check. You never can tell what do they want these days. If they won't take your cash, they won't take your cashier's check, and they're leery of your wiring instructions. But I mean, it's just where we are with the way the internet is working these days. Each title company might have their own little rules. Typically, we're wiring money. Be careful about who you give your wiring instructions to.
Bill?
Yep.
So, when you go to close and the numbers don't really match up, and they have a check, they'll let you write a check up
Personal
to.
check.
Usually $1,000.
Okay.
Is that what it is? It moves a little bit. Usually around that number. Okay, okay. Moving onward, information from other sources. What I know about these houses, I got from some other source. I did not. I wasn't here when it was built. I never measured the thing. I don't know if your seller's disclosure is accurate or not. I really don't know what school district they have. Everything I know about these houses, I got from some other source. If there's something particular I want you to know about, I'm going to add it over here or whatever. It's in here that we reemphasize about the seller, the buyer getting a new survey, and they should check out their historic districts here. If there's something odd, put it over here. I want everyone to understand about these 500-year floodplains. They're going to require you to get an elevation certificate in 500-year floodplain. Addition, new construction, 500-year floodplain has to be 2 feet above the 500-year water mark, which means in the 100-year floodplain, you might have to build 7, 8, 9, 10 feet higher than the existing foundation. All different throughout the city.
Now, if you are selling a 500-year floor plan.
Yep.
Do you need to require your,
If we represent the seller, we can't require the buyer to get that elevation certificate. We're going to notify them that they're in the 500-year floodplain and they're subject to new regulations in the city of Houston in the 500-year floodplain.
how do we notify them?
You're going to notify them any number of ways. On the seller's disclosure, we ought to be able to tell them right there. I mean, that's a notice, right? If you put it there, then that's fine. If not, put it on something like
And
that.
also, their agent should have provided that to them,
The
right?
other agents aren't very smart.
Yeah.
They're not very diligent, and they don't understand all this. I'll just be honest with you. So 99.9% of people don't understand what I talk about all the time over here. So it's hard to expect that the other agent's going to do that right. We're going to have to do it for them. Now, I don't want to scare off the buyer.
Right,
We're going to sell houses in the 500-year floodplain. We're going to sell houses in the 100-year
And I
floodplain.
say, I
We're
should,
just going to make sure that this. I don't want them coming back and suing the seller, which in turn means they're going to sue us because they didn't know something about the repercussion of buying in a 500-year floodplain. No different from buying a car and having to wear a seatbelt. So,
yeah,
just precautions. Any questions about this form? Yep.
Yeah, just, we were talking about that. The rules are different in the city versus.
The ETJ and the county, that's correct. They are different. And they're different in Montgomery County and Fort Bend County than they are. They're different in the city of Westview and the city of Bel Air. So it kind of depends on where you're at. So we're talking in general, city of Houston most of the time.
Right.
But in one of those other areas, it's totally different. Okay, a lot of firms are using this special flood hazard deal. I think this is also, we need this form if they're in the 100-year and the 500-year floodplain. So if you're representing the buyer, we need this form, or you're representing the seller, we need this form. So if you're the seller selling a house, along with your seller's disclosure, I would have the buyer sign this form so that they have something, some sort of knowledge over here.
And I'm sorry, I'm gonna ask, if we're representing the seller,
If you're
we're
representing,
gonna need to get the buyer to get an elevation certificate?
I cannot require the buyer to get an elevation certificate in the 500. We're going to advise them to, but we're going to give them the information that they need, that they're in the 500-year floodplain and subject to new sets of rules and regulations. Yes, is that what we're going to?
Information about special flood hazard.
Yeah, so that's what we're discussing now.
But that's if we are in 100 years.
You need this if you're the seller. You need this for the 100 and the 500 year.
Oh, 500 too?
You need it in the 500. You need to notify. So this is the seller
Yeah.
really telling the buyer they need an elevation certificate. We can't require them to do it. We gave them the notice that they should get an elevation certificate.
So CYA for us.
That's right. For the seller.
What about if they are one of the 60% that felt flooded outside the 100?
Okay.
And we represent the seller or the buyer.
This is not a bad form to give to anybody.
That's right. It's really not a bad. It's not a bad one. But I want us to
Right,
be sure
right.
that we use it in the 100 to 500 year.
But actually, if the seller's disclosure, it only say on the 100.
That's correct. But you
But
can
what
mark,
about-
on the seller's disclosure, you should mark that the property is in the 500-year floodplain.
Right, John Dorothy do it for everybody, even if you are not in the flood zone.
That's a lovely thing.
And we do it for both.
That's right. Okay?
On the seller's disclosure.
On the seller's disclosure,
You have to, it says, if you check this, you have to provide the importance.
on the 100, I would go to another paragraph and say, this property lies in the 500-year floodplain.
You want to add.
There's not a box to check, you're gonna put it on there.
Okay, but my seller is not, doesn't have to sign this, even though it says that
This thing right here,
the buyer.
the buyer signs this.
That's the seller.
That's right, the
But
buyer
it seems to
signs
imply that the seller has to attach this to the seller's disclosure.
to any contract that for the buyer to sign. You want to submit this before you sign the contract, because I can't make them sign it afterwards. I mean, all these forms need to be signed along with the contract. So if you're the seller and you get an offer, you should submit this right on back to the other agent
Okay.
and make sure that they sign this and submit it back to their contract. It's required in the 100-year and the 500-year floodplain. For the notice, for the buyer. That's what we represent. If we represent the buyer, we're going to sign this also. That's a no-brainer. Now, what Rhonda said was, it is a lovely form to have everyone sign, but we need to require it because we need to have given them notice in the 500-year floodplain. They need to get an elevation certificate. And in the 100-year floodplain, they need to mark. See, it doesn't do any good to know where the 100-year floodplain is. And where you need to know where the 500-year +2 level of flooding in the 100-year and in the 500-year. So if I get an elevation certificate today in the 100-year floodplain and it's 67 feet and the house is at 65 feet, that implies that they're 2 feet out of the floodplain. But it doesn't mean that they can get a permit to build a house at that 2-foot level. They may have to be 5 feet above that because we care where the 500-year flood mark is in the 100 and in the 500. We need the 500-year elevation, not the 100-year elevation. That's the confusing part. Nobody's used to marking the 500-year flood mark, and you need the 500-year +2.
Okay, now.
So in Meyerland, I get an elevation certificate. It says the 100-year floodplain is at 67 feet, when in reality, the mark of the 500 might be at 72.
Mhm.
You need to know that. They need to know that. Every buyer needs to know that.
But Bill,
Yep.
it looks to me, you just said, I'm sure I've had her sign this. The seller should sign it.
No. I didn't say the seller should sign. I said the seller should have the buyer sign. The buyer should
Okay.
sign. If we represent the seller, we want the buyer to sign this. If we represent the buyer, we want the buyer to sign this.
Okay.
But the buyer's signing it.
So if you represent the seller
You
and the,
represent the seller.
and the buyer's agent submit everything without that, we say, hey, buyer's agent, please have your buyer sign this.
Absolutely.
Let them know that even though this house didn't flow, we are in the 500-foot zone, please.
Yes. Yes. The answer is yes. Yes, Mark.
So, are we going to have a standard disclosure form for Boulevard?
Yes, we are, for the 500.
Yeah, for
Yes, we are.
500 that you may be subject to.
Yes.
Okay.
Aaron, we need to finish that. We started, but we didn't finish. Yes. All right. We're good there. Already. What time is it?
We're being rushed along.
11:50. Okay, we're gonna zoom through some. Those were probably more difficult. All right, let's go to the contract right quick from the buyers and things that I think are important for the buyers that we maybe didn't hit the last time. Mr. Buyer, here's a copy of the contract. These contracts favor the buyers, and in most reality, they can't make you buy a house unless you produce something fraudulently. But you have some responsibilities that you need to meet. You must give me the earnest money in a timely manner. You must give me the option fee in a timely manner. And I have the responsibility to have those things receipted. And if we don't do it in the timely manner, these contracts allow for the seller to terminate the contract without you signing anything. They can terminate these contracts and move on with another buyer. And I have no ability to protect you in any way whatsoever. I didn't have the checks and I didn't get them receipted. Okay? The seller can terminate this contract if we didn't produce in a timely manner the checks and get them receipted. Yes.
And all the seller gets out of that is just out of the contract.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So we have responsibilities that we must meet. Once we meet those responsibilities, our next major issue is the unrestricted right to terminate. So we must do our due diligence during that period of time. That's when we're evaluating the property condition. Okay? And we can find out anything we want about that house and we can negotiate. We can't require the seller to do anything. Now, the information that we provide to them, they're going to have to provide to subsequent people. So the logic is that they would feel like they would deal with us the same way we would deal with somebody else. But if we're being unreasonable, they can, not agree to it. We terminate and they take their chances on the open market. Property values go up and property values go down. When they think the property is worth more than what they're selling it for, they're not going to negotiate very much. When it's worth less, you're not going to want to pay as much. So it's the fine art of negotiation during the unrestricted right to terminate. We have provisions, so long as you're financing, that you must get qualified. And I'm hoping that you're qualified before I ever go and show you one house, which means you're going to get with a lender. You're going to get not only yourself qualified, we're going to get you approved. Anyone can get pre-qualified because they're not basing that information on any documentation that you've given them. You've just given them some information that may or may not be correct. Buyer approval is when the buyer has been submitted and the assets have been verified and the employment has been verified and the credit has been verified. Now you're an approved buyer and you're 10 times ahead of the game from someone who is just pre-qualified. So we want buyer approval. With buyer approval, though, along the way, we still have protections for you in the event that the lender does not find the value with the property. We care about the amount of appraisal for the lender's purpose. We have some protections in there for you. The mortgage appraisals are really going to be dependent on the mortgage company orders them. I don't have any ability to pick who they are. The other agent is really going to, they can talk to them, but they're independent appraisals these days to determine value. If you're putting a significant amount of money down, more than 20%, and the property doesn't appraise by a certain amount, it really doesn't impact your loan. These are psychological decisions then about value. So if I was financing 50% of $1 million house and it appraised for $950,000 versus $1 million, you're putting the exact same amount of money down. You're putting $500,000 down in any scenario, and your terms were the exact same. The mortgage value didn't make any difference in that deal, but somehow you feel like you're overpaying in that scenario, right? Okay. Likewise, if you're buying this $1 million house and it appraises for $1,025,000, you suddenly feel better about it, right? In both scenarios, I think they're totally arbitrary. I don't think the house is worth more than what you're paying for, nor did I necessarily think it's worth less if the mortgage appraisal comes in at $50,000 less than the sales price, because there's too many gray areas. I'll give you an example. We've sold many condominiums where our people take $1 million 2-bedroom condo and they make it into a 1-bedroom, and they take the other bedroom away and they make it into a big closet, much like I did on my own house. It's on the tax records for $1 million. But we went to sell that unit and someone was putting $700,000 down and financing only $300,000. And they couldn't get any appraisal whatsoever because there weren't 6 units like that in that building that sold in the last 3 months or 6 months. Does that mean it's not worth $300,000? Does that mean it's not worth $500,000? It's just a function of it wanting to be like something else. The mortgage world would like for there to be so many of the exact same things selling in a certain amount of time. And does that really have anything to do with what you think it's worth? All those sales are in the past. They have nothing to do with what's on the market or the future value of things. This is just a mortgage snapshot based on some sort of information that really has no real bearing today of today's value. It's measuring the previous value. It's measuring previous sales, past sales. It's weighting the whole information based on things that are no longer on the marketplace, what someone was willing to pay today. And that's just the way the industry is derived. I don't think that's the best way to determine value. I'm gonna play by whatever rules that you want. Most people want their house to appraise for the sales price, and that's important to you. We're gonna have a form that goes over to you. If you wanna make your offer more attractive in a competitive environment, and you're putting significant amount of money down, I would make it not subject to the appraisal. We're gonna have some choices along the way depending on what house that you buy. Yeah.
Okay, so if the buyer either through no fault of their own, i.e. they lose their job, or they buy a car and they are no longer going through underwriting, and underwriting kicks it back out, is the escrow money at risk?
Yes, it is. If the buyer approval period is over and the buyer loses their job, the buyer is subject to losing their earnest money. Yes. Now, if you had 21 days for buyer approval and that happened in the 21 days, but typically we would not give a buyer that long to get approved. But yes, there is risk. I would be untruthful if I told you otherwise. So if you're totally wanting to protect that buyer and give them any excuse to get out of the contract till the day of closing, then you're going to put a long enough period that it lasts to closing. And I get why someone might want that. But if I was the seller, do you want to give the buyer a free pass till the day of closing? Probably not. So you're back to negotiating again. If you have another choice, don't agree with that. I understand why the John Daughter agent might want to put 30 days for buyer approval, because the buyer could lose their job. If they think they're going to lose their job, they probably should be buying a house, right? I mean, and if not, then we all just need to know what the inherent risk is. Because I can always use that scenario. I can go by myself. If I want to not get buyer approval, I'll just go buy myself an American Express today, and then I won't need it, and then I'll take that Rolex back right after I get my earnings money done. I can do that. If I just want out of the contract for buyer approval, there's any way. So, I mean, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't agree to it. I would say the buyer, if the seller is going to take the inherent risk and pull the property off, and if a typical earnest money is about 1%, which is about the house payment anyway, then yeah, I want $5,000 or $10,000 for taking the house off the market, having a set of inspection reports, and having to go market a house now for the second time.
How often do people actually not get their earnest money back?
Very rarely. Very rarely. Because the same scenario, you just fight about it for the longest time, and it keeps the house from being back on the market. So, I mean, very rarely. Just if people really feel like the buyer took advantage of them, some sellers are that way. It happens more with lawyers than it does others, because they feel entitled. They have a sense of entitlement. I mean, it's not like it never happens, but I mean, rarely, almost always. This is the way, I mean, I'm trying to go back to doing business with the sellers. Don't do business with someone who you don't feel like has a high standard of ethics and just decency. And are we in the habit of keeping people's earnest money? And we're just really not. I mean, Sell to someone who wants to buy your house where the transaction's nice, and don't try and take people's money because you entered into some great contract with someone you thought was a bad person. Don't enter into the contract to begin with them. Okie dokie. So we're gonna go over the contract here kind of briefly and go over a few things. I hit the highlights there. What I'm gonna point out along the way, things that are attached and not attached. I will be honest with you as a buyer, the things that get us are always the key to the breaker box, the clickers to the garage door opener, the last remote to the satellite TV, and yes, they're obligated to provide this stuff, and rarely do they ever do it. I mean, the stress over the same $25 for the clicker. Right now I'm dealing with one on the stupid code to a safe that we closed in last December. I don't have the code to the safe, we fight over these sort of little things. If they're overly stressful, let's try and work all this sort of stuff out in the option period as much as possible. People get otherwise distracted. If you're the seller, you're moving on, you're packing up, you're finding your temporary housing, you're dealing with your kids leaving the last day of school. It's a life-changing event. The last thing you're going to think about is a garage door clicker or the keys to the mailbox that you never locked anyway. But it becomes an issue when you're the buyer and you don't have access to the back of the mailbox now at the wrought iron fence. But we'll try and work these sort of things out, but it can be overly stressful, and I want to not stress you out about it along the way. We will have total clarity, because if there's something that I know is included but the other agent may not be quite as bright, let's just make it as clear as possible. Let's make it as clear as possible about a built-in refrigerator, a satellite dish, a TV. The TV is naturally excluded, but let's just make it clear that they're going to leave the, what is that other thing called? The bracket, and let's make sure they're going to leave the bracket. Let's just make it as clear as possible to everyone so there's total clarity. Or then they'll say, oh no, I'm going to take the bracket. Same time I'm going to negotiate, then yes, going to take load, texture, and repaint the entire wall over there. I think that's a lovely thing. You'll be surprised never do it, just leave the black bracket. You don't want the bracket, Mr. Buyer, because you're not going to put a TV there. And you don't want to deal with having to take float and texture and painting. We need to tell them right up front, remove the bracket and take float and texture. Right? If not, you're going to get the chance to do so. Cash, I don't think we need to go too much on paragraph 3 or 4. I talked about in paragraph 5 that you need to get me this earnest money as quickly as possible. If you don't have a check, go to the bank today and get you some temporary checks. We're going to need several. We're going to need a check for the option fee. We're going to need a check for the earnest money. Might need to extend our option fee. Yes. Title policy is typically paid for by the seller. It is a negotiable expense. We only really stress over with new construction. It's rarely an issue on a resale house. Could be with a lawyer, could be with an estate, could be with a property and a hot commodity. If you want to make your offer attractive, sometimes you offer to pay for the title policy. I had 937 Oxford the other day. It was 12 offers, and the buyer offered to pay for the title policy. It was a $8,000 issue to the seller, and they chose the one where the buyer chose to pay for the title policy. So it is a way to help make your offer more attractive in a competitive issue. It's about 0.75% of the sales price of the typical title policy. These title policies are going to insure from the period of closing backwards, okay? And it's insuring the legal description, things that would get filed of record, liens, encumbrances, deed restriction. You'd be surprised the number of townhouse communities that we have where they've taken us a lot and they put in 6 townhouses that never filed the deed restrictions at the courthouse. They provide everyone a copy of them over here, but they're never really recorded. Then what happens is somebody does something that they don't like, and one of the 6 angry neighbors goes over there and files the deed restrictions down. All of a sudden, it now is recorded. It comes up all the time. This shortages of area that is often misunderstood has always been an option for the buyer. There's a paragraph here now that can be chosen that we can choose for the buyer or seller. It's an additional level of protection that the title company would offer a buyer in the event that something comes up on your survey that they did not have knowledge of at the title company, okay? It doesn't cover anything that's on the survey, so you're gonna get a new survey, and it's gonna show a 3-foot utility lien, and it's gonna show the fence is 6 inches out of whack, and it's not gonna cover you on any of those items. Shortages in area cost 5% of the title policy, and it covers if something comes up that was not disclosed and not on the survey. And an example like that townhouse thing is one that I mentioned there. So it's available to buyers. Rarely would the seller want to pay for that. It's similar to credit life insurance. You can get credit life insurance if you die, it pays off your credit cards. Hard to imagine the seller's going to pay for your credit life insurance. You can pay for your credit life insurance. You can pay for the shortages of area. You can pay for it along the way. You can buy it the day of closing. You don't have to decide today. So we're just going to check the little box that shortages in areas would be paid for by the buyer, not the seller. It's not going to be amended at the moment because you can do it at the closing table. It's just additional coverage that the title company is offering you because they would love to upsell you, just like Walmart would like you to buy some more gum at the countertop. That's why they place all that gum and candy right there where you check out. They want you to buy something. You're going to get the title commitment, which is just going to show if there's any restrictions that we need to further evaluate. When we get that, I'm going to be sure to look at it along with you. It's going to show the current lender, the current lien holder, if the buyer, if the current seller had a lien. We don't know if they paid it off or not. They could have paid it off in the interim. But we're looking for deed restrictions or encumbrances on the title commitment. I'll be looking for it at the same time you get it. We're going to get a new survey at our expense because we're going to hold the surveyor liable in the future if someone has a difference of opinion. If you want me to search for something in particular that would show up on the title commitment or not, that would be the ability to park your motor home in your subdivision, the ability to paint your mailbox like the Texas flag, the ability to put on the flagpole and fly the world's largest gay flag in the middle of your neighborhood. These are things I need to go search for. That's what we're going to insert in this sort of little objection here. Not that these realtors put in, new construction or I don't think that I would put those sort of things. It is probably already single family residence. You want the opposite. You want to search if it can be used for commercial purposes or not. Is there a restriction against it? Because I'm now going to buy a house on Heights Boulevard and I want to know if I can put my law office there in the future. That's what you're searching for, not the ability to be single family residence. Anything odd, this is a perfect place for that. I want to put in a swimming pool. Putting in a swimming pool is very important to you. Let's put it in there so that everyone is doing the due diligence to make sure there's not some drainage easement down the middle of your backyard. Anything odd, let's just put it in. There's nothing bad to put in. It's better to be safe than sorry. I'm buying this house only because I want the ability to build a garage apartment. I'm buying this property because I want to put my auto shop in the back. I'm buying this property because I intend to add on. I'm buying this property for whatever future purpose. Let's search and do whatever diligence we can do in the objection paragraph there and give ourselves a reasonable amount of time. Not reasonable is, we want 7 days, the seller wants 1 day, we compromise at 3, 4, 5. Once we have the information, we can terminate or not. Gives us the ability to terminate. Not most of this stuff has to do with obeying the rules of the law or your mortgage company. If you don't have a mortgage company, much of this wouldn't apply. We're not in a statutory tax district. We're not in a tidewater. You're not subject to annexation. You're not in a special utility district. You're not in a public utility district. You don't have any transfer fees. We don't have any underground propane gas areas. Water does fluctuate. That's kind of an interesting one, the water fluctuation levels, especially if you're selling in Kingwood or Cinco Ranch or something. That last little sentence, we never really go over it. Seller hereby notifies buyer the water level of an impounded of water adjoining the property fluctuates for various reasons, including the result of an entity lawfully exercising its right to use the water stored in the impoundment or drought or flood conditions. So the seller has notified the buyer that it's subject to flood conditions in this contract these days, right? Access, they should grant us access. It's reasonable. It's not reasonable to go 14 times. It's not reasonable to go at 9 o'clock at night. It's not reasonable to go with 1 hour's notice. You know, we've got to be reasonable. If it's vacant, I'll make myself available, but if it's occupied and bath time is from 6 to 7, they don't have to grant us access from 6 to 7. If their religion requires them not to show from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday, that's reasonable. They have the right to do that. So I mean, it's within reason over here. But they do have to turn on the utilities. They're required to do that. They're not on, keep them on, and provide us the ability. If we want a stucco test or we want a hydrostatic test, if the house is older than probably about the 80s, then I would probably suggest a hydrostatic test. It's looking for broken water pipes in the slab. If we see a lot of trees adjacent to a house or very nearby, remember the whole canopy equates to the width of the root system. So roots and foundations don't go particularly well. So if we notice some of those things along the way, we might need to ask for additional testing for hydrostatic testing, foundation work. Seller's going to give us a seller's disclosure. Remember, the sellers barely know what they're doing. I doubt that they're being deceitful. They might have gotten bad advice. We need to rely on our own information. The typical thing is someone buys a house. They got 2.5 kids. The kid sticks his rubber ducky in the drain. The water overflows upstairs on the second floor, and it overflows down into the first floor. And mom's cooking, and she sees the water coming from the AC vent. And they did that, and that happened 18 months ago, and it all dried out. Are they going to dispose that? You know, and let's say they even did take the sheetrock, take it down, patch it, and put it back up there. Are they going to dispose that? In reality, they're not going to dispose that because that's not a current flaw in the house. Now, when you go and do an inspection and your guy comes with this infrared test and he sees that there's signs of previous water penetration, he's going to point it out. And then you're going to feel like the seller didn't tell you everything. Every house has had some foundation work. Every house has had some termite treatment. Sometimes it was 20 years before this seller owned it. I mean, it's a gray area how to even fill out. Most people cannot tell the difference between a range, a cooktop, and a sauna and a hot tub. It's very confusing to a lot of these people.
What is a range?
A range has an oven in it.
Okay, so a range.
A range.
A gas
versus
range.
A cooktop. A gas range has an oven underneath it.
Got that. What's a stove?
The same thing as
Thank
range.
you, I thought
the same
so.
thing as
Okay,
range.
okay.
The exact same thing.
Thank you.
Just how you word it, whether it's a pop or a Pepsi, it's
Well,
just the same thing.
I just, but that
It's very confusing.
Yeah,
And so
right.
You just gotta tell the seller, let's go over this, when we get a seller's disclosure, we're gonna look at it, and let's go over some things, and let's point out some gray areas, about what we typically do gray. But I'm a realistic person to think they're not accurate a lot of the times, and I think they're not accurate for any number of reasons. Rarely is it that they're trying to be deceitful. If they're really trying to be deceitful, let's just don't get under contract with them. We're gonna rely on our own information to begin that.
For estate sales now, we require that
I think we had one right after we just talked. They just had this subdivision. Did you see in the newspaper that they're suing using the deceptive trade practices because the developer was not required to give the notice, but certainly had knowledge that the damn thing flooded, and they sued them using deceptive trade practices. This is what I would say about the state. They need to disclose what they know. What they don't know, they do not have to disclose. But they know if the utilities are on. They know if it has a roof. When the estate just paid a bill for the roof, they know it has a roof. They're in there. Does it have an air conditioner or not? What they know.
The one question they answer,
they just answer what they know. What they don't know, they don't need to. And the law does not require them, but it does require them to disclose what knowledge that they have. So they need to disclose what they know. Okay?
Bill?
Yep.
If they have fixed the problem,
Then it's done.
then it's done.
Then it's done.
They don't have to disclose.
They don't have to disclose it. If I had rotten wood and I replaced the rotten wood and I prime and paint it, I don't have to disclose that I once had rotten wood. If I had termites, and of course there is a previous one for that, we're looking for that. You're looking for what treatment did they have. The foundation, when they treated it, then you're going to check the previous foundation. But other than those two, you really don't have much disclosure. unless they had a meth lab in there.
Okay.
These lender required repair, so I mean, the way it says in here, if the lender points out something that gets us specifically in FHA and VA loans, let's avoid those if we can, but if there's a 20-year-old roof, if there's peeling paint, right, if there's a broken something, the appraiser could note it and the lender could require that it be repaired. There is no requirement for the seller to pay for that repair or do that repair. It's just a requirement that it be done as a condition of the loan. But we can't make the seller fix those things, right? So you're gonna go fix someone's house prior to you buying it, or how you're gonna have to negotiate our way through that. Now, if you can't get your loan, we can get you out. The property didn't meet its conditions, so the provider used the third-party financing, didn't it? But it can be a problem. It is an issue when I go to sell a house that's in need of repair. The lender is going to require the repair. Seller is not going to repair the house on your behalf, and you're not going to repair the house for the seller's behalf, and we end up in a problem. As long as we know that going into it, this can be an issue. How are we going to address it? You can address it any number of ways. We're problem solvers in real estate. You know, you can pay for the roof and put a lien on the house and get paid back at closing. I mean, there's any number. I mean, I had a VA loan. The wooden deck touched the house. They were not going to loan the money. My guy was hell-bent on that house. We gave the seller $10,000. We removed the deck. The appraiser came back out. We closed. The seller gave us back our $10,000, and the buyer paid to put the deck back. And that's how we had to do it. If that's what you want, then that's. You couldn't make the seller remove a deck. He wasn't going to remove a deck, and then you're not buying it. Then you got to put the whole deck back on there. So there are creative ways around it, but it can create a problem. So we try and point those things out along the way. If I anticipate some lender required
Why
repair.
was that a problem?
On a VA loan, it was a wooden deck in the house. They didn't like the wood.
VAs.
It's a bungalow in Oriole on West Cottage Street. They didn't like a wooden deck.
So
No,
how
they're
do you
low.
protect your seller when you know you are selling a fixer-upper?
It's not that different. Well, I mean, vote for a cash buyer.
Right, no, but let's just say.
Let's say that-
conditional, that it's going to.
It's a problem. I mean, it's a problem in these deals, depending on who's buying it. You're leaving yourself only to a fair number of buyers. So you can tell the buyer, look, I don't have the money to fix this. We're under, let's take your scenario. $300,000 bungalow in Lindale. It's got an old roof. We agreed to sell for $300,000. The roof's cost $10,000. I don't have the $10,000. I don't have the $10,000. Mr. Buyer, if you'll put up the $10,000, I'll reduce the price to $290,000. That's one way to do it. Or you put up the $10,000, we'll go to closing, you get back your money, and I'll pay you the $10,000 for the roof. I mean, there's ways around it.
But you reduce the price and then the lender says, no, you've got to replace the roof.
No, you have to replace the roof. Yeah, you're gonna have to find a way to replace the roof.
And
You go to Cruise and you say, Cruise, I need for you to replace this roof, and I'm gonna pay you closing and put a lien on the house. And it's not like I've never had to do that. Sometimes, I mean, Boulevard Realty's paid for some of that stuff and been paid at closing, and I knew that I was just gonna go file a lien on the property. If I didn't get paid, if that didn't close, I'm gonna get paid Sunday. But I mean, it happens a lot of times in new construction. Let's say you want to paint the house black. The builder might require you to put up twice the money. Once to paint it black, once to paint it white. We'll credit you. You put up the $100,000, and I'll credit you back. I'm selling a house in Memorial. It doesn't have a pool. The buyer's putting up $100,000. Pool. You don't buy it. I got a pool for free. You know, you do buy it. I'm going to credit you your $100,000. But I'm not going to build a pool for these people for free. I'm going to get the money from them.
why can't they until after?
They are really,
They're coming from California and they don't know a pool company and they don't want to buy a house for $3 million and then have their backyard all messed up. They'd rather us just do it right before closing, which is fine. I got a pool. My seller got a pool out of the deal.
if they don't buy.
If they don't buy,
And they gave you $100,000, go ahead and
it happens all the time.
in your world.
It happens all the time. In new construction, it happens.
In your world.
It happens all the time that the buyer puts up. I mean, I'm selling Lindsay Lee's house on 600. The buyer put up $37,000 for the changes that they want. I wasn't putting in that range or that bathtub or that ceiling fan. They put up the $37,000. They paid it to us, non-refundable. You don't buy it, you're out of luck. You buy it, credit you your $37,000.
Okay.
It happens all the time in new construction. Okie dokie.
Okey doke.
Closing. I already mentioned this about the closing. We're negotiating with the seller. Seller wants your money to come out as quickly as possible. You want your house as quickly as possible. It'll be very stressful over here. I would allow, if it's occupied, some time for them to close and get out. That's fairly common these days. We can protect you as well as we can with anything else. And it's just very common. If you were the seller, you wouldn't always leave without your money. How can I expect them to leave without theirs? Special provisions, anything weird, we're going to put in special provisions, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to practice a bunch of law. I'm not going to write things, just because we write it in there does not make it true. If we write in there, Bill Baldwin will clean this house once a week for the next 3 years, am I obligated to clean the house? No. If we write in there, title company to release the money on buyer's demand with no signature from the seller, they're not obligated to follow those rules. Only one that's obligated are the buyer and the seller. They're the only ones that are involved with this contract. The realtors aren't involved. So we only want to insert things in there. Anything you insert, the lender's going to see. So let's keep that in mind. Paragraph 12 explains who pays for what in normal circumstances. Everything could be negotiated, but if you want the seller to pay for some of your closing costs, you're telling the seller you don't have enough money. Is that what you want me to tell them when we make our offer? It's not uncommon somewhere out in the suburbs, but it's fairly uncommon in an urban environment to tell the seller that you don't have enough money and you want them to pay for some of your closing costs. I can go to Walmart and ask them to pay for my taxes, the sales tax, but it's highly irregular to think that they're going to do so. Yeah.
Question on that.
Yep.
But negotiating that as part of the allowance for repairs.
You can. I think it's perfectly fine. It's great. The issue you get in is when the repairs are too great. But yeah, paying a couple $1,000s in lieu of repairs is a lovely, normal thing to happen. These people that, and it happens all the time, they go to some brother-in-law lender and they say their closing costs are $16,000. They write in there, seller to pay $16,000 for closing costs. And the seller agrees to it for whatever reason. And we get to the day before closing and the lender only allows $8,000 because they didn't allow for the proration and they didn't allow for the insurance, they didn't allow for the escrow, even though we all told them this to begin with. So now what's happening to the extra $8,000? Half the time if the seller's a prick, they're just going to keep the money. We agreed to it, and I have had it before. I have had this happen to me where I represented the seller and the buyer's agent, and I said, there is no way this is going to work. There is no way this is going to work. It's going to work. It's going to work. It's going to work. Being perfectly honest with you, you're doing this against my advice. You're putting in the $16,000. When it's not $16,000, this seller is not going to give you this money. We're not paying you outside of closing. We're not giving you anything else. Your client is going to lose the difference. And I swear to God, exactly what I said happened. It was $8,000 too much, and my seller made $8,000 because their agent was stupid. And that's just the cost of that buyer. They didn't get $16,000 paid. They ended up having to pay out of pocket that other $8,000, and we didn't pay them outside of closing for their $8,000. I was perfectly honest right up front. You're perfectly honest right up front. I don't think that's being a prick. I think that's being perfectly honest.
Bill?
Yep.
In Texas, can you
Pay more than 3%?
well, pay that amount of money?
Yes, you can. Sure you can. No, out of pocket?
No, I'm sorry, after closing? Is that legal to do?
It depends on it depends on the situation. So if they were, let's say it's $1 million and they were putting 20 or 25% down, yes, you could pay that back. If they're financed 95%, then no, you really couldn't pay them outside of closing legally. I'm not saying people don't do it. They do it. It's easier to go pay for shutters or a new refrigerator or washer or dryer. Typically, you wouldn't pay back to the seller, to the buyer. Okie dokie. Prorations, casualty loss, default, any of these sort of things matter to anybody? Attorney's fees, the mediation, all these young lawyers we represent. You don't have to agree to mediation. They're going to send us to mediation anyway. You understand the court system is backed up. They're going to send you to mediation. It's not binding arbitration. You're not bound by what that. They are going to send us to mediation, and you can go and say, I don't agree, and then you can get your court case back over in the court system, and we can hear it in 5 or 10 years. But they're going to send us to mediation. It's not binding arbitration. There is a difference. We talked about sellers, buyer. Okay, let's talk about this notice 21. I mean, we are required to provide some way to notify the buyer. And some of these firms, who shall remain nameless, who think that they're required to put up 3, an address, a phone number, an email, that's just bullshit. There is no requirement to put up 3 ways to contact the buyer. That's just simply not true. But we need something. I mean, and I don't, so can an unscrupulous seller then contact the buyer? They could, they're not supposed to. We have to write letters occasionally, so you can put care of Bill Baldwin at Boulevard Realty at 833 Studewood. That's fine. Remember, but that's how you have to provide the notice. So if they just give the address and let's say you just have the address of the seller and you're going to provide notice, you need to make sure that you probably need to set something in the mail, mail them their little letter at the same time if you don't have an email address for them or some receipt that they're in agreement. So let's say you're in the option period. We only have the seller's address over here and it's 4:59 and you're trying to terminate and you don't have it. You can email the other agent, but that doesn't mean it got to the seller. You're going to have to put a little letter in the mail over here. Now, that's why you would want to do it the day before, and you want to get something else in writing back from them. An email back from them is perfectly acceptable. But we're going to need some way to notify the people. I don't necessarily want to give the other side of my client's address purely for financial reasons. If they live in a $6 million house, buying a $500,000 house, I don't want Greenwood King to know that. If they're living in a rental over here at Yale and 6th, I don't think it's any of their business. So there's rarely a scenario, because I know how stupid people are. I mean, they're already Facebooking and LinkedIn these people. Yeah. They're going to look up their taxable value, and it gives them some impression, which may be false. It may give them the impression they don't have enough money. It may give them the impression that they have too much money. Neither scenario is great. An email address I don't have an issue with giving the email address. So if you want to put the buyer, this title company is going to have to find the buyer anyway. So I would just in general do that. If your client wants to remain anonymous and they want everything to go through you, that's fine. You're just now responsible. But we do need something. We don't necessarily need 3. The addendums all go over there. Option period, we discussed that. Preceding these option periods and all these sort of things, we went over that last time.
No,
yep.
You're saying that if you want your buyers to remain anonymous, that's fine. You're not doing any information there. But don't you have to put the party to the contract if this first paragraph?
They have to put their name, the buyer's name. Sure, and I might give them billbaldwin123@gmail.com. That doesn't tell me I live at 6 Teal Way in a $16 million house.
Right. So if you still have to picture it, and you can't do buyer one, you have to put the buyer's actual name on the contract in paragraph 1.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Unless they're buying in some LLC, they can buy it in 1545 Heights Venture LLC if they want. Then they wouldn't know. Okay. But it's the notice for someone to contact them to provide the notice.
I just got a contract that I wrote to the seller was listed as owner of record.
And it's fairly common when you make the offer that because HCAD's wrong half the time. We were all taught to do that in many ways. It's not bad because it's just whatever that pops up on the title commitment, that's how it's going to be. Whether that's 1C Perez Martinez or 1CG Martinez or 1 Martinez, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. So you can put that for the seller. The buyer, you need to know because we need to know if they're credit worthy or not. So the seller, you're going to figure out from the title commitment. And if it doesn't matter, I mean, these people that in my world, when we learned 20 years ago, I mean, we had that whole Latin thing, whatever. I mean, who ever remembered any of that? I mean, you would put their name and those Latin phrases right after that. Remember, we all did that, and we just so got off of that. And so it just doesn't matter if I'm Billy Dane Baldwin and I go and put on there that I'm going to sell under Bill Baldwin. We're going to figure it all out whatever's on the top of it. I bought Balin in this house using Bill, but my real name is not Bill, it's something else. But I can buy it under Bill all the time. So it's just, that's why we put owner of record a lot of time. Because HCAD's wrong sometimes, especially when there's two names that Mary Smith and John Jones, and they got Mary Smith Jones, and it's wrong half the time. It's just easier to put owner of record, move on down the road, and whatever it is what it is. So it's not uncommon. Okay, third-party financing addenda. Do we need to go anything there? I do think here's where we're getting. We didn't discuss this last time. That when you fill out this third-party financing addendum, on the very last paragraph, the buyer is giving everyone on earth the ability to contact them and all of his lender and all of their information. Okay, they're basically giving. They can provide to the buyer or the seller or the representative, that's everyone on earth, information related to the status of the approval of the financing. I mean, so are they approved or not? Do you have the appraisal or not? So if you want this, when I first did this, remember we had to have the separate form and you had to grant permission and all that sort of stuff. That was way too cumbersome, whatever. So if they're not using third-party financing addendum, we don't have the same written authority to go contact all those people. Because you can buy a house with financing, not subject to financing.
Yeah, right, you have to check that box.
Yeah, but this does give us the ability to contact their lender. We're always worried about that. Can I contact the buyer's lender? Well, sure you can. They gave us permission to contact their lender. Okay. Lender's appraisal. We've gone over this before. We've had another 2 weeks of experience here. So do we want to go over this form one more time? Mr. Buyer, you're going to get a mortgage. Do you want your mortgage appraisal number to be a factor of whether or not you proceed with this transaction? And if you want it to match the sales price or higher, I need to know. Or if you don't care if it matches the value or not. If you're putting a significant amount of money down and you want to make your offer more attractive, maybe you make it not subject to the lender's deal. If you care overly about it, then check the box one, and we'll do it that way. Here's where I see it getting us, because everyone's going to get fixated on this for a while. So this is what I'm going to test this myself, because I just love to play broker. When the first one that goes and says, seller will adjust price when property fails to appraise, I'm going to write back, so long as the buyer is willing to pay the greater price when it appraises higher, right? It ought to work both ways. If you expect me to lower the price when it doesn't appraise, I expect you to pay more when it appraises for higher. And they're not going to be willing to do that, right? So I'm going to say, okay, you've gotten us to agree to a price that I know is below what it's going to appraise. So I'm not going. I think it's going to come out. I'm going to be curious. It's like the square footage deal. I love the people that say, property must, the square footage must equal, or buyer has the right to terminate or adjust the price accordingly. Great. Provided you're going to pay more. In the event I said it was 2471 square feet and it comes back at 2525, I want you to pay me $275 a foot for the extra 67 square feet. Not one person has ever wanted to do that. But it's fundamentally fair. I don't know what the square footage is. It might be more, it might be less, whatever. If I know that it's less, then I'm going to, do to the best of my ability. But it works both ways, so long as you're willing. We didn't sell you the house based on it being 2,471 square feet and $275 a foot. That was important to you. You should have written that down. Just because the square footage is different, you don't have the right to renegotiate based on a price per square foot basis. They don't have that right, unless they wrote it in there. If they write it in there, you write back the other one, and I think you'll see that they're not willing to do that. So long as it appraises, they do not have the right to terminate if the square footage is off by 100 or 200 or 300.
So, like 12 and a half, I got 25,000 over asking. So what could I have done to protect my seller?
You want to use the form our separate form about the appraisal not being, well, you would have used this form now, I'm sorry, because now you'd use this form that it only had to appraise at the list price. You could have chose no appraisal. Did they pay cash or they financed?
He was, you know, that's the other thing, he had on there, he's
Paying
putting
cash.
down $300K. So
That's why you help
it
decide.
really doesn't need to appraise out.
That's right.
$300K.
Yeah, so you would have used this form.
But what if they put that on third party and he's only really putting down, he only's gonna do 50,
That's right.
right?
You should have used this form and you should have checked the box that it was only subject to appraise at the list price or X price.
Right.
Number 2. This is a new form, so we're not used to using it. That's a perfect example of where you do not want it to be subject to the higher dollar amount.
And you know, a lot of people.
Only what it,
On the third party, they're gonna put a lot down, but they may not
that's right.
in reality.
Yeah.
So, you
That's
know,
right.
you wanna protect your buyer, your seller.
This is the way to do it on the appraisal.
And then he actually will have.
So what you could do, just to see if they're bluffing, and it's not like I have never implied my client was going to put more money down than they really intended to. So in general, when we make an offer, we put 20% down. Whether if they were going to put 50% down, I didn't really want to tell the seller that we had 50%.
Yeah, sound like you had money.
Right?
Yeah.
And if I was really only going to put 5%, I might today just put the 20% down, knowing that he's probably going to get an 80-15-5, and it's fine along the way, as long as it doesn't cost the seller delay in closing or whatever. So it's not like that. But on the $300,000 deal, verify the cash. Right, quick. See if they're bluffing. If you verify the cash and then they decide that they're only going to put $50,000 down, then that's just plenty. My world is very rich, and they finance as much as they possibly can because they'd rather take that extra $200,000 and play the market and go buy on some bull stock over there.
He even had a deal, if somebody comes in at higher than 25,000, he'll match it.
As long as you provide it in writing.
Right.
I saw that.
You go,
It's not uncommon in a bidding war to write that also.
Do you put that about, do you put anything special provisions about buyer can alter financing without?
No, because he can. I don't understand why they go to all the effort to write that. They can. There's nothing that prohibits them from
as
doing
long
it.
as it
Doesn't adversely impact the seller until they close it. They can. They can put. Is there anything that stops anyone on earth from putting more money down? No. There's nothing that stops them from putting less money down either. They maybe don't have the same clause in the third party financing addendum if the interest rate changes because they had the chance to down. You can't make them put 20% down because they said they were going to put 20% down. But now they only want to put 5% down and they still can close. Just same as if they want to put 50% down.
What are you putting now on the third party financing addendum at the interest rate?
4.75. That's probably what I would put. I put a half a point. We're edging our way to 5 very quickly
Let me
here.
say it the opposite way. If I'm representing the seller, how much do I want?
5.5. Yeah, 5 is probably what the seller wants today.
Right, but is it reasonable? Is 4.75 reasonable?
Yeah, it's reasonable. Somewhere in there. Good, that's a good question. We're gonna need to, all year we'll be having that same conversation. It'll soon be higher and higher and higher.
Each time you have the conversation.
Right.
It's gonna go up higher.
I'll be curious how high it goes. For 10 years I've been saying it's going higher, and I've been a liar, so I'm not saying it till it's higher yet. Non-realty addendum, I'm gonna go over this one briefly. This is anything odd we're gonna put on here, but I do wanna kind of be careful again. So what is normal and customary? Again, it's normal and customary to get a refrigerator, washer, and dryer. They're typically included, so you can get, that's normal. It's normal to get a barbecue grill. It's normal to get a outside patio table. It's normal to get a billiard table, a pool table, or front porch swing. When you start getting beyond much more of that, you're going to start flagging the lender and the appraiser and everything else. So if I'm buying a beach house and I'm buying all the contents over here, they don't want the loan or any lien to go over all of these other contents over here. So at some point, you have to rethink how that's going to work. It's not that you wouldn't have the form, but you probably wouldn't then give that. You're conveying that separate and beyond the real estate transaction. So at closing, the seller agrees to sell to buyer for $10 the contents of the master bedroom and the refrigerator, whatever. It doesn't matter over here. But you start listing out 30 things for $1, you got another problem. So you have to kind of think it through a little bit of how that's going to work. We have had these lenders climb down and say, no, we're not going to agree to this thing for $1. You need to go pay $500 or $1,000 for the current, worn value of those sort of things.
In class the other day with Lloyd Hampton, he said, get realistic about it.
Yeah, you're gonna have to get realistic. It is still,
Real clear.
the $1 or $10 for the refrigerator, washer, and dryer has not flagged anyone, because that's still fairly common. It's when we start getting too far beyond that, it's flagging everyone. We're having to rethink it over here. And some of these things, you start getting a bunch of stuff, you're gonna get the chance to pay $500 for it. Okay? Let's see, let's sure get that lead-based paint notice. We're emailing it to them somewhere along the transaction. Have some transaction to your email that shows you gave them the lead-based paint, especially women and children. I mean, first give it to everyone, be clear. Old people, women, children, anyone with those things, I would just make sure we email everybody.
Is it too old-fashioned to have your little packets in the new house? I mean, in our new office?
No, I don't think so. I didn't know we didn't have them. No, I don't think.
We don't.
I didn't, I mean, we can still have the little pamphlet.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. Where do we get them? Bar? The lead-based paint pamphlet we always put out for 25 years.
Oh.
I didn't know we didn't have them.
No.
Because we emailed it anyway.
You do?
I do. I include it with the contract.
Yeah, but
We can get the
email
pamphlet.
is like 40 pages.
No, it's 10 pages, but I read it overnight. But yes, we can get some pamphlets.
Thank you.
We can. A lot of us are accustomed to the pamphlets at the house. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yes, I don't do anything like that. This environmental endangered species thing, I never really understood why that's what. They can do whatever they want, so long as the days match the option period, okay? So you wouldn't want a 7-day option period and a 21-day to investigate the rare horny frog from Katy Prairie over here. So it's fine, I don't even, so if this matches the option period, why do you even need the form? I never could quite figure out why we messed with this, but don't catch yourself and allow someone for a longer environmental period than you do the option period. So long as they match, we don't really care. Force majeure. We haven't talked about this for a while. It's a lovely idea to submit this, especially if you're dealing with a small firm or agent that doesn't do a lot of business. In reality, this is basically the law, but we've just made it more clearly here about how the law works. I'm going to sell a house on Bayland, and it's set to close on Friday. And on Tuesday, Tropical Storm Erin forms in the Gulf of Mexico, and they don't issue any flood insurance. That transaction cannot close on Friday, even though we don't have a storm and it's sunlight out here. They don't do that. That's when you would need this force majeure. Happens all the time to me at Christmas. All the time this is dealing with this because the guy doing the deed is in Indiana and it snowed in. He can't get to the office that day, so Chase isn't going to close this transaction in Houston. It's 90 degrees on December, but it's frozen up there in the tundra of Michigan. So, I mean, you need something over there that everyone understands. Things are delayed through no fault of one another, and the transaction is still in play, and everything is still going there. And if they won't sign it, we need to know why they wouldn't sign it. It is, in fact, and everyone has a force majeure sort of clause going on over here, but it's just nice to know that we've laid a little groundwork that things come up. It's a good form to have, and good to know if they won't sign it.
So, with the closing date, since time is not of the essence, when is it
reasonable?
But there's no definition for reasonable.
It's reasonable because there's too many variables. If the title company loses power and you were set to close at 4 o'clock on Thursday and Amity Bank doesn't have any power, we could scramble over. I mean, it didn't close, so you're still under contract.
Or if the lender didn't give them the payoff information.
That's right. So you're under contract. Everybody's still contractually obligated to perform to the best of their ability over there. Yep.
So
this force majeure wouldn't be signed unless that situation came up.
No, you go ahead and submit it with your offer. You know, you just get it signed early on. It's just, especially hurricane season, we use it a lot in Galveston, and especially in the winter. I'm not saying you have to use it in every contract because it's, you know, rarely than anything else, but definitely a Galveston property. These things with flood insurance, I mean, I would think that we would need this more because you're not, you know, they may not issue flood insurance. You know, if there's a hurricane. So it would come up in any of those times in the 500-year floodplain or somewhere else where you need the flood insurance and it's just not available.
Right, because what's the cutoff if something forms in the Gulf?
72 hours. Yes, it catches us a lot. I mean, certainly.
Yeah.
In Galveston, they're used to delayed closings anyway, so it never really creates that big of a stress because they're on island time anyway. But it's fine. Okay, seller's disclosure. We had this in the packet. I don't know that we needed to go over anything. We went over it pretty thoroughly last time. Any questions about that one? Anything I didn't cover?
You've got these two interesting pieces of paper
Let me
here.
see
Is there
what
a
other-
reason
Oh,
why-
I did bring, we just gave to you the difference between a pre-qualification letter and a pre-approval letter. Anyone on earth, Ginger, my daughter, can get pre-qualified to buy $1 million house. But when they go to verify that she doesn't have how much money she thinks she has, then she's not approved to buy that house. So I want you to understand the difference between pre-qualification and approval. You want a buyer to be approved. If you represent the buyer, go get the buyer approved. The things that get us all the time, people who have changed careers recently, people who are self-employed, realtors are not the easiest people to finance. Pharmacists are not the easiest people to finance. Doctors and lawyers are not the easiest people to finance. Anyone that makes a large commission is not easy to finance. They think they make $100,000. They really have a $30,000 draw on their paid commission. They just paid advances on their own commissions. Sometimes those things, they you know, until they're verified. A lot of times this time of year, people are using their income from 2017. It's subject to them pulling the tax return from the IRS to verify. Because let's say they made $100,000 in 15, $150 in 2016, and $300 in 2017. The lender may flag them and require them to pull the tax return from 2017 to make sure they didn't produce a fraudulent tax return. And now it may take the IRS 30 days to produce that information. So they're not approved, they're just qualified over here. So you think you're going to closing and you're not closing until the buyer is approved. So I want you to understand the difference. Everyone else needs to go get approval. The third party financing addendum, that's why those days are for approval. Literally, everyone should be approved before they really make an offer, and we ought to put 1 day for buyer approval. If they really got approved with Chase, and we think they need to go get qualified with TAF over here, okay, let's go give them 4 or 5 days to go and do that. About the same number of times in the option period. It's not for people to have a lender, get out of the option period, then take 15 more days to go shop 5 other lenders over here, decide which one that they're going to use, and when they can't get exactly what they want, have the right to terminate. It's not fundamentally fair to the seller. We need to know that people choose your lender and get approved in your option period. Otherwise, it is or isn't subject to the house getting approval. I know why they might want to be leery of someone keeping their job or getting fired. I know why an agent might want it to be longer than that. It's just not reasonable. I don't think that's reasonable. Or pay me for it. Pay me non-refundable $5,000 for the chance to take your house off the market for 30 days in case you lose your job or not. You're not willing. If you're not that comfortable about keeping a job, then I'm not going to be that comfortable about keeping a job. If you're buying a $500,000 house, you don't know 1% whether or not you're going to be employed or not. Why should I take my house off the market for that?
Can I ask you, I have
Absolutely.
2 qualifications.
You don't have, I didn't look at these
One's
things.
supposed to be approval and one's qualification.
One is supposed to be approval and one's supposed to be a pre-qualification.
Excuse me,
What-
sorry, user error.
Okay, user error, okay, problem, good answer. Okay, what other sort of questions that impact the buyer? Any sort of questions out there?
What about consulting and education?
I think you're certainly subject, anyone that wants to use an attorney, we're happy to do so. They do often delay and cost you money. I don't think an attorney is necessary in a normal transaction. they would be copied automatically and they'll wait for them to respond. So, and you can do it at any time also. So typically, but if your dad's an attorney in Dallas, and I'm representing Mitzi over here, buying her first house, and she wants dad to review everything, and he wants to review everything, put it on there. I think that's lovely. Getting through a divorce, we got two vicious, people over here, and she wants to use her lawyer, fine. But generally, it's not necessary. They're standard forms. They're done. These things are done thousands of times a month without a lawyer. If there's something in particular, let's bring in your lawyer to deal with. Otherwise, you're just adding a certain amount of expense. It's probably not necessary. Do what? Time. Any other questions? So what we're going to do after 2 weeks from today, we decided we're going to do our boot camp. What's our title? How to boost your career. Boosting your business. That'll be the same sort of time frame. We're going to go over all kinds of strategies to boost your business. I'm around all day until I get my hair cut. If you have any other questions. Hopefully you learned something.
2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today.
I guess that would be the 19th.
All right.
I'm so restless.
You still are? You haven't got better contact?
Thank you.
He is might not get it. At some point, you're just
Yeah, it's
Okay, so they could be
I was wondering where the lunch is. Is it?
Yeah, anyway, got an application. And he said, so he went through and said, wow, I never did. And I don't think he's really enforced. I read. That's not good. And I don't know. All right, here's the thing here. They passed one. So I said, he's liars on that case. I'm going to pick up my sign and tell him.
They can request in writing what it is that you like.
They haven't asked for it in writing. Have him give it in writing. No, she emailed me and said, did he say what? I'm thinking, do I want to tell you this because I met you and he thinks you were the follower one and the other one was the show? No, I'm sorry, no. One of them's fine. Really great. At first, and now he's like, I've been looking him up on the internet. I said, how do you know the same person? So there's another. Well, I'm pretty sure. He's just, he's just.
And not any other application?
No, we had.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
I think they would.
Crash it on.
Oh, it's wrong.
Next year.
I'll
Like, y'all are gonna get